Isn't it just typical? That's going to kind of focus on the theme for the vPub in the rest of 2025, and that is looking towards the future, positivity, and trying to be a bit pragmatic and trying to see, glass half full instead of glass half empty, all of that stuff. And then just in the last couple of days, rumours start to drop about Diageo releasing the 2025 special releases and the prices associated with those. If they end up being true, it really is one of those kind of facepalm moments, really frustrating. But regardless, we're going to keep to the original script. We're going to look into Diageo, how much of an effect and an impact they've had on all our whiskey journeys, whether we want to recognise it or not. And I'm going to try to pick 5 personal things that I'm grateful for that Diageo have brought to us. I'm looking forward to it. I hope you are too. I'll see you all in a second. Hello, whiskey folk. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the vPub. Welcome again to another Thursday night session of us just really getting to hang out and talk about whiskey for a couple of hours. You know, that sacrosanct little pocket of time. Wonderful to welcome you all again. It's fantastic as I'm getting ready for these things as usual. You know, I tend to be sitting here sometimes looking at all my really messy notes and things like that and thinking, what am I doing this for? What motivates me to do this thing every week? But of course, it's easy when I sit in the vPub seat and I look at all you guys gathering in the lounge, pulling up your bar stools, putting something nice in the glass, perhaps wherever you are across the globe, and tuning in to enjoy whiskey with all of us. And I realise immediately why it's so much fun and indeed a privilege to do this type of thing. Topic tonight has kind of always had the sense of maybe me biting off a wee bit more than I can chew. And it's certainly been easy to put it off and leave it languishing on the list of topics. But there's been a few things that's happened in recent times that's really made me want to pull it forward and talk about it. And it's not because I want to shine lots of praise and light on one specific company in whiskey. And it's not because I want to throw a lot of criticism towards one particular company in whiskey. Everything that we do in the vPub and everything that I do in this channel is to kind of just share our feelings and our opinions and our experiences as we kind of navigate through the whiskey world, trying different bottles, spending an inordinate amount of money on whiskey in order to do that, in order to enjoy things, in order to chase flavor. It means that you pick up certain perspectives. And that's why we're all gathered here tonight to do that type of thing. So I need to caveat everything that I know I don't need to, but I will anyway. Everything that we're going to speak about tonight is, of course, from the perspective of me as a consumer, me as an enthusiast, and likewise everyone that's in the chat participating live, and everyone that's picking this up on the replay. Thank you so much for doing so and leaving their comments in the video underneath. It is genuinely another feedback stream, positive and negative, for anybody who's interested in tuning in and participating. So this is only from the perspective of an enthusiast. I have never worked in the whiskey industry. I mean, you could argue I do now in some ways, but I do always keep my distance. I'm always on the side of the consumer, of the punter, if you like. I've never really seen behind the scenes. I don't have any under the bonnet, behind the curtain type access to actually know what goes on inside any of the companies that we talk about. So everything, you can be sure, is from the poor, sometimes a little bit naive, certainly very opaque, distant, slightly disconnected views of the customer. We can only interact with all of these products through the brand, through the liquid, through the experiences that we have with them. And whatever comes out of that process, it's nice to be able to sit and share it. So that's what I'm going to talk about tonight. I'm going to try my hardest to focus on positivity. And in order to do that, I have pre-selected 5 points, and I'm going to try to justify to my community. I'm going to try and justify to all of you that's tuning in tonight and picking this up after the event, why I think these are important and very, very positive things that we can be grateful to, either Diageo as they are known today, or Diageo's, let's say, previous forms before they became Diageo almost 30 years ago now. That's what we're going to attempt. It will inevitably mean that we need to pick up some negative topics. It's inevitable. And I'm very frustrated about the news that's come out in the last few days. I know it's just rumours right now, and I'll share these things based on the fact that they are rumours. But it's kind of potentially going to take the shine off things a wee bit. But it is what it is. It's the vPub, and we're just going to run with it. Anyway, before we get into all of that, there's a couple of wee bits of housekeeping to do and things. But I'll do what we always do. While you're all pulling up your bar stools, charging your glasses, getting comfortable, everyone that's participating with joining us live tonight in the lounge, I'll jump in and I'll welcome all of you beautiful whiskey folk and dedicated barflies. All the early folk that are in. David Evans is celebrating being a member of the Barflies for 65 months. So 65 months ago, David, that's amazing. Thank you so much. David signed up. He must have been one of the first. He signed up to be a member of the Aquavitae Barflies on YouTube. That's by buying or clicking that join button. Unless you're on an Apple mobile device, you can't do it through Apple. Apple won't let you. But if you're on desktop or other devices, you can click and join the YouTube membership. You get access to channel-themed emoji, a little loyalty badges, a little Barfly loyalty and things like that, just to colour the chat. But what you get, the biggest thing that you do is you keep everything ad-free. So shortly after I started the Barflies thing on the channel, it was very easy for me. I didn't need to go to Google anymore and do an ad revenue split. I can keep the channel completely clean. I hate ads. I don't like ads. And I don't have any control over the ads, what they are, what the content is. So people like David Evans and Doodle the Dram Ardnahoe, who's celebrating being a member for 15 months, saying feels longer. He's laughing. I hope that's a positive feeling. And Gerben in the Netherlands is saying amazingly, it's been 4 years this month. Gerben, you superstar. Ardnahoe, you superstar. And David Evans, 65 months. Thank you all for helping to keep this channel going and ad-free. Cheers. Huge thanks to all my patrons. The patron support behind the channel, the thing that keeps it going, the thing that keeps me going, the thing that keeps my energy charged, the things that keep the, as they say, the light switched on. It allows me to invest in the channel and call this a living. Amazing is the Patreon support. And so many of the names in the Barflies happen to be patrons as well. It's quite amazing to see the overlap. My pal Highland Hamish is in and he's bought me a dram quite early on. Thank you, Hamish. It's nice to see you, fella. He said, greetings from Inverness, Roy. Here's a dram to the amazing Barflies who were in Campbelltown last weekend. Incredible generosity and friendship. And it was wonderful to see Hamish through the Barflies page on Facebook. I was able to see some a witness have a wee kind of fly on the wall. Can we say that? A barfly on the wall? And I'm glad you had fun. We're a great, fantastic, positive and friendly, welcoming community. I love it. Ted Brooks is sending 20 of those said Aquavitae gift memberships out into the wild right now. 20 of you will be randomly awarded those. Ted, you superstar. Thank you for your generosity. Thank you for supporting me. Okay, cheers. Helen Williamson is here. She was one of said Campbelltown attendees. Good to see you, Helen. Even from Isle, everyone in Aquavitae, continuing our amazing whiskey holiday and making new whiskey friends. Fantastic. That's what it's all about, Helen. I hope you get a chance to stop off at Ardnahoe while you're there. More to say about that in a wee minute. John van der Bort is in saying Aquavitae. Evening. Nice dram of your Ardnamurchan 413 in the glass tonight. Good man. I'm glad you're enjoying it, John. Thank you for being on theme in the Aquavitae theme, for participating tonight. Ginger Genius John is here saying good evening, Roy, and all the Barflies. By the way, I'm picking this up by just picking up orange. So if you type Aquavitae or at Aquavitae, better chance of getting my attention. Matthew Burton is here. Good to see you, Matthew. Saying hi, Roy, back from London Cadenhead's new release tasting, just in time for the vPub. Excited for the Ardnahoe, which should arrive tomorrow. I'm excited to hear what you think about it, Matthew. I predict you'll enjoy. More about that in a minute. Bill Malcolm is saying, hello all, had a large Aquavitae Ardnahoe earlier. Yum. It's going to be nice to get some feedback. I know not everyone's got it yet. Yeah, a wee bit like Matthew, still waiting, but Bill's obviously got his hand on his. Bill, thank you for picking it up, and I'm glad you're enjoying it. Alistair Gray saying, good evening, Aquavita and Magnificent Barflies. Good to see you, buddy. Good to see you onshore and enjoying that Ardnahoe as well. Pedro Menezes in Brazil saying, good evening, Barflies and Aquavita. Good to see you, Pedro, as always. Jimmy Leggett saying, you turned barley at Springbank, Aquavita. You just had to pay them to do it. Man, that doesn't count as being in the industry, though, does it? That's just having some fun working. Yeah, it was the whiskey school down at Springbank, obviously Jimmy's talking about. Peter is saying, evening, I did more than just turn it. There's a lot of work. The guys that put in the shifts, especially in the malt barns and the malt floors down at Springbank, you know, they're not shy to a hard shift. They're grafters. Peter is saying, evening self-bottling barman. Good to have you behind the bar again. Good to have you in, Frank, big guy. Good to see you. Jimmy Jazz is saying, just poured Cadenhead's 21-year-old Mortlach from a Hoggy Aquavita, and it's sublime. Sounds sublime too. Wee bit jealous. Rob Halford's in saying, if they take Glentalkers from us, we ride at Don Aquavita. Glentalkers a Pernod Ricard brand. Yeah, I don't think there's any danger of it going anywhere. I think it's quite a unique spirit, right? George Ellis saying, greetings, Roy, from Arizona, from one punter to another. Hey, I like it, George. Absolutely fantastic, buddy. And David in Portugal is saying, this is an important exercise. We have a lot to be grateful for, even when we mostly spat in the face. Some reasons, keeping the boat afloat during the lochs, world availability, flora and fauna. Interesting, David. There might be some overlap with what I'm bringing tonight. Doodle the Drama is saying good evening to you. And all you awesome buzzing barflies generally excited about today's theme, as most distilleries that float my boat this year are Diageo, says Arnie. Let's celebrate them. I like the spirit. Good way to start off. Best foot forward, right, Arnie? Warren Tanner is saying, first time back live in the vPub Aquavita, still riding on my high from a recent 10 out of 10 on the quiz, and thrilled to be heading into Oswa season, Slantia. Warren, if you can make it through to the quiz at the end tonight, it's possible that you might match your 10 out of 10 again. But it would need to be a very canny-minded soul, I think, to navigate through tonight's quiz at the end. Should be a good one. Fernando saying, evening, Roy. Evening, Barflies. How's everyone? Good to see Fernando in Dudder Court. That's Mike saying, good evening, Roy. One guess what I'm drinking tonight. Okay, I can guess what you're drinking, Mike. What I want to know is, do you like it or not? Just as it jumps down the bottom, but Sean Holtgrave, sorry, Sean, has been a member of the Barflies for 18 months. He's got a wee gold barfly next to his name now, saying, waiting patiently for my Aquavita Ardnahoe bottle. Right, with so many of you talking about the Ardnahoe, it's probably right that I just get in and start talking about it. Whiskey Wolf is saying, good evening, Roy, and Barflies, hope all is well. Will there be a section about the Aquavita Ardnahoe release? I have a question, but I don't want to cut ahead of topic. We'll do a wee minute of it now, will we? Sean Cosner is saying, evening, Roy, enjoying a Talisker Distillers editions in the glass, so on theme. Nice of you to bring it on theme, Sean. And Ewan Cleary is saying, Ardnahoe opened last night and enjoying my way through the shoulder of the bottle already. Safe to say it's going down a treat. Listen, I think I've got my energy across with the whole Ardnahoe thing. Feeling wonderfully privileged to be able to do it. Over the moon that we managed to get it over the line months and months and months later than I intended to. It's down to it's no one else to blame other than me for that. But I really think it benefited from taking that extra step, that extra beat, and just being a wee bit sure. Let me just spend a minute getting you up to date on the latest release. For anybody that doesn't know, it's a Barflies release. So this is me working directly with a producer that I have approached and offered a collaborative concept to see if they want to get on board. It's to help elevate my standing. It's to help elevate their standing. It's to bring really good quality whiskey that I believe in out to our community. And my community is prioritized. So it's sold through the Patreon support first. But this time we went around things a little bit differently. We made a small batch of a scale that was large enough to make it out of that Patreon support, because we've had problems with it selling out to patrons in the past, leaving patrons disappointed, which is the worst thing. But also, by the time it gets to public, even if it does, there's maybe just some scraps, a few cases left, and it disappears. And we leave a lot of people in the community a wee bit left out. So I wanted to at least go at this to see if we could do something a bit bigger scale. So we've added 3 casks together. We've got an outturn of 762 bottles. There is nothing close to that left. I don't have any kind of real-time information as to what stock is left. But this afternoon, things were going really, really well, and we'd smashed through 500 bottles. So there's a couple of hundred left, I think. But don't quote me on that. And if you end up leaving it until next week or something like that, you know, there are no guarantees. It's on public sale now. Everyone can get a hold of this. All the patrons have had their first bite. They got a second bite at it as well. And now it's out there. It's on. There's no password gate or anything. Everyone can go in and pick this up. It is the first fully ex-bourbon, small batch release from Ardnahoe. All three casks were first fill bourbon casks. It's bottled at 55% ABV and 6 years old. Look at the colour of it. I know that the white balance is just a wee bit off on the camera, so you can't quite see it. There is a problem. Then I've discovered, if you look over my shoulder here, you can see this empty bottle here. It's completely empty. And it's only been in the house for about 10 days, maybe a bit over a week. And the problem is that I think as soon as you break the foil on these bottles, they're leaky. Every morning I come back downstairs and the bottle seems to be much lower than I remember. Listen, it's a great illustration of when you're really, really enjoying something. I was confident this was going to turn out quite well. When I tried it, I was relieved. Now that I've gotten to know the whiskey, sipping it since then, I'm absolutely over the moon. What means the most to me, though, is all of the feedback from so many of you. Yes, we're a wee bit frustrated that it's ended up on auction before it even ended up on Whiskey Base. But these things are going to happen. It's just going to happen. It's just the nature of it. We're not buying it for that reason. We're buying it for the gorgeous ability to taste, nose, and enjoy. Thank you, everyone. I hope you're loving it. Cheers. Tell me what your question is, won't you? I'm trying to remember who it was that had the question. Was it Whiskey Wolf? I think it was Whiskey Wolf. I'll look out for your question. Daniel Key is saying, how do you explain the colour of my Ardnahoe? I demand a refund. So I think that Daniel bought the Whiskey Shop Octave single cask, which was XPX. Completely different to this. It's going to be two different ends of the bandwidth for Ardnahoe flavour. Jimmy Legs bought me a dram already. Thank you, buddy. He said, I give you $10 to save a dram of that Ardnahoe till next fall for me. Jimmy, we're going to get some of this to you before then. My goodness. And yes, the dram is yours. Consider it yours, my friend. Sugar Kitty saying 10 days. It took that long. Well, to be fair, this bottle, it wasn't a full bottle. This was, by the time it got into my house, this was a half bottle, but it's gone now. Loved it. And this one I was hoping to keep for a lock-in with patrons, but I just needed to get it open. You know, I've got backups, as you can see there. I'll just put it here for now. Don't want to lean too far. So grateful that you're enjoying it too. Whiskey Wolf was saying, my question is, how can we justify £85 for a 6-year-old whiskey from a new distillery when new and old distilleries overpricing their bottles is a frequent hot topic? What's the difference? Fantastic question, and I'm glad you bring it up. I remember going back to Ardnahoe way back in the day and giving them this very, very question. Ardnahoe were celebrated back then for their core range product, released about 5 years old, and being about £49, I think, from memory, in 2020 when it was first released. But there were also single casks coming out at 80, 85, 90 plus pounds for single casks. It wasn't any older. Sure, the ABV was higher. It was cask strength from a single cask and things like that. But to be, you know, a significant chunk more expensive was something I had to inquire about, and I had to ask about why is the difference so much. And they went into quite a spiel about how difficult it is to manage such small batch releases versus a larger scale release. It's much, much more difficult. If anybody saw the behind the scenes video of me, it was only released to Barfly members and YouTube and patrons only, but I made a little video of me literally going along to the bottling hall to see this getting bottled. And because I was there, they encouraged me to get my sleeves rolled up and things. So I was filling bottles, I was applying labels and things. So I got the full behind the scenes look at what is actually involved in setting up a bottling line for a ridiculously small amount of bottles. Now, Hunter Lang are of the scale now that they're big enough to have a huge, large-scale bottling line that is invested in now that they've got Ardnahoe going through. But in the past, everything would have been very, very small batch. It's much more expensive to do that. More than that, the cost of maturation is not that much per litre per year. It can be measured in pennies per litre per year. The cost of making malt whiskey, most of it is up front and in the front end, and then having to wait for the cash to return once the things mature. So the cost of 5-year-old whiskey is not half the price of 10-year-old whiskey. In fact, it's only incrementally less. So the promises that we've had from these producers is that, look, if we can keep the scale the same, so we're comparing apples for apples in terms of size of outturn, the price should remain the same or not have increased so much, all other things being equal, such as inflation, rising energy, tax, duties, tariffs, whatever it may be. The price should not have got that much more expensive. Another way of saying that is that you come back to our 5-year-old in 3 years' time, there's a chance it's going to be 6, 7, and 8 years old that's in there, not just 5-year-old liquid. And it'll end up being the same price. Whiskey Wolf, I fought really, really hard to make sure that the price of this release would not go higher than any. For instance, the bottle from Daniel Key was £125 from the whiskey shop. Now, I can't comment on that. I don't know why that is so. Maybe because it's 171 bottles instead of 762. Maybe scale's an issue there. It's from a PX Octave, whereas my release is from 3 bourbon casks. But this is £85, which is the same price as their small batch Fischel releases for 2024 and 2025. So despite the fact that there's extra parties involved making margin from this release, I worked really, really hard and got support from Royal Well Whiskies, the retailer, and from Hunter Lang, the producer, to bring us what I feel is a fairly priced product. More than anything, just to ice this cake before I move on, thank you for the question, Whiskey Wolf. I think I'm always talking about using age and specs on a bottle and things like that, especially when we can't taste it, to hold and give us a gut feel and gauge what a product is, who it's intended for, all that type of thing. But we can never really understand what a whiskey is worth in terms of impact to us until we taste it. If anyone is unhappy at paying £85 for this when they're tasting it right now, please shout loudly in the chat. Likewise, if you're very happy, if you've tasted it already, please shout loudly in the chat. We're all here from the point of consumption. Gary Field is saying, my label wasn't straight. Is it your handiwork, Roy? Gary, if it's not straight, there's a good chance it was my handiwork, but hear me. Every single label on that bottle, it's not automated on that line. All the infinite loch and the balsa, the large scale Ardnahoe outturns goes through an automated line. So the bottles just get stacked up at the start and they spit out the other end fully labelled, corks and capsules on, labels nice and straight, date code printed, everything. Everything I've just mentioned to you, if for anybody that's seen that video will see that, for a small scale outturn, single cask, small batch, 2 or 3 casks, everything is not through a machine. It's done by hand. It is a lot more expensive than Inverurie Whiskey Shop. Good to see you, Mike. Can't stay long tonight. Long day tomorrow. Only wanted to say I only ever heard great things about Diageo from within the industry. Bloggers, indies and ambassadors, etc. Reb is saying, I'd love to go to a whiskey festival in the UK, but they're all on Friday and Saturday. No good for me. They absolutely are, Reb. It's when we have them. Occasionally they spill over to Sundays. Whiskey Wolf is saying, that's fair. I can understand the reasoning behind it. Thanks for taking the time. I think, though, we would always be happy to pay less for whiskey in general. Haha. Listen, so much of the content that I spout on this vPub weekly is exactly that spirit. We have to, as soon as we just roll over and accept the prices of everything, we're just tenderized, right? Peter Lee saying, I want to say thanks to every single person attending my Sunday event, especially Helen, Arnie, Roy, and Jenny from Ardnahoe. Also thanks to Denise too. We're all going along to Kwangtung and Paisley on Sunday night this coming week, where Peter's put together a tasting in honour of Diddle the Dram Arnie. And it's going to be hosted by the charm that is Jenny Carlson from Ardnahoe. Peter, I'm looking forward to it. I don't know what to expect from the whiskey other than it'll probably be focused on Ardnahoe, which is a fantastic thing. But I do know what to expect from the food, and I'm looking forward to it, buddy. Ethan Roy says, Whiskey with Molly Ben and Whiskey Folk. A bit late this evening. My label was upside down. Wink, wink. Jimmy Legg is saying, if it were available to me, I'd be very happy to pay the price. So little whiskey comes my way now that my whiskey budget is barely touched. Jimmy, I know that you're out in the outback that is Nova Scotia, Canada, state controlled and all of that. Listen, we'll find a way for you to get your head around this whiskey. Alistair is saying, good evening. Good morning, afternoon, and barflies. I have a Thompson Brothers Manickmore in my glass, so he's on topic. Manickmore being a Diageo distillery, of course. And Herb is saying, yes, Jenny should be on the show again. Yes, she's always popular when she is here. Simon Ray is saying, drinking the Aquavita's bottle alongside the Ardnahoe Society. Very different, both delicious, but your bottle definitely edges it. Thank you, Simon. I want to point out that Simon is not on the books. He's not paid or encouraged to say such things, but that's nice. It's nice to hear. It doesn't need to be better than anything else, either from the same stable or elsewhere. It just needs to be worth it. It just needs to be good. And I have to tell you, I mean, I'm constantly putting my nose in it. I feel like I know this whiskey better than anything else on the shelves right now. I've been enjoying it so much. It's very thick, chewy, and viscous. It's very buttery and oily in texture. It just bursts with yellow fruit for me. There's bags and bags and bags of smoke. But in the background, you've got this kind of lovely backbone that I think comes from that 6 years potentially, where you've still got the creamy oats, the kind of cereal notes in there as well. And it's nice just to sit with it, and depending on the mood you're in and what you're tasting, what comes forward. Tonight, it's the yellow fruits. And it's, for me, when I say yellow fruits, yeah, some stone fruits, some light citrus like lemon and things. But the big hit I get is from a slightly underripe starfruit and some kind of grilled pineapple. Obviously, the grilled element coming from the fact that it's smoky. But that yellow fruit vibe is what I'm talking about. Cheers, everyone. Okay. Before we go on to talking about the topic tonight, do you remember a couple of years ago we did the top distilleries? I think when it was on the vPub, it was top 10. And I realised it would be a much better project to have a much more static kind of admin type thing. So I passed it over to Dramface, and Dramface expanded it to top 40 distilleries. And they've been running that in the background, and it's constantly live. Top 40 distilleries are constantly live. And every now and again, they'll take a snapshot and then share the updated numbers. But I think what's been noticed is that as we come up to the next snapshot, which has been a long time, it's May last year since the last snapshot. And the reason for that is because we're not seeing the number growing as fast as we imagined. We're about just under the 2,000 participants mark in that poll. So that's 2,000 people out in the community. You go to dramface.com, click on the top right-hand side blue button, top 40 distilleries. It's a link through to a vote. You can go in and vote for your own top 10. But what we're seeing there is that there's not a lot of movement. And of course that makes sense, because the original votes that we took way back in the day are kind of sitting there untouched. And that's kind of making up a big bulk of it, maybe a third of the votes. So we're not seeing it reflecting the trends that a top 10, top 40 chart should be reflecting month to month, year to year. So what we're going to do is we're going to change and take much more recent participants' votes so that we can map the dynamics and the changes. We might still only see positions move 1 or 2 or 3 or 4. And we won't see huge swings, I don't think. But I think if we do that and just take the jury's still out. I think we're going to go the last 1,000 perhaps, or pick a point in time and take it from that point in time, and then just be transparent as we always are with everyone and let them know. But I say all that to say this. Go to dramface.com, go to the homepage, top right, top 40 distilleries, get your votes in, get them up to date, because Dramface will imminently take a new snapshot and share that with everyone in the coming weeks. So please, now that there's almost 350 of you in, I'd like to see some of you having an opportunity to just take a couple of minutes to go in and complete that top 10 list. It might be harder than you think, but you've got 10 votes. If you're picking this up on the replay, likewise, thank you for your time and support. It all goes to help people in their whiskey flavour chasing. Sasha Faber is in saying, having to wait until Wednesday for Ardnahoe to arrive. I'm on theme with a wonderful Thompson Brothers generic, 12-year-old, no regrets at all. Fantastic. Sean Causer is saying, take off the VAT production, manufacture and distribution plus individual margins. £85 for that presentation is a great price. Thank you, Sean. I would like to see all of these types of releases become a little less expensive. But when you learn how little the producer actually makes, then you realize we're shouting at the wrong people sometimes. That said, some of the discussions that we're going to have tonight is when those prices become cynical, lazy, random, weird, premiumized for the sake of premiumization and nothing else. Billy Bennett is here saying, having a glass of Lager 16. It seems to be the only Diageo single malt that I have open. That's interesting in itself, Billy. We're going to touch on that tonight. Jimmy Leg is saying, as you may guess, my ideas about distilleries haven't changed. Well, I don't know if that's true, Jimmy. I think we've changed a couple of your perspectives, maybe just by a couple of degrees. Maybe on things like Loch Lomond, for example, but we'll see. You remain a work in progress. Justin Wan in Hong Kong has bought me a dram saying Linkwood. Hope they'll get a mention tonight. He's saying, obviously, he's a big fan of Linkwood Distillery. Sharmila is in. Good to see you, Sharmila. Saying, I had my final dram of Thompson Brothers Mystery Malt. 14-year-old Kalila this evening said, sad to bid adieu to this fine bottle. Fantastic. 65 quid. I hope you get great value out of enjoying that. Alistair McPhail is saying, Ebhead, sorry I missed it too. Speaking to Rolfie, and Ian is saying, evening all, evening Roy. Okay, nice to see you, Ian. Let's get into things. A wee bit of a backstory. Does everyone know who Diageo is? Literally, it's one of the biggest drinks company in the planet, biggest spirits company. When it comes to Scotch whisky specifically, what we talk about in this realm and the Planet vPub, they control roughly about a third, but actually more than a third, closer to 40% of all the Scotch whisky produced annually in Scotland. And they've been going around since 1997, and it's been roughly about that scale over the, give or take a few percentage over the years. So we're getting on for 28 years, 30 years of Diageo. And even before Diageo, their previous names, if you've heard of United Distillers and Vintners, if you've heard of DCL, if you've heard of various names that they've had as they've evolved over time. We know them today as Diageo. We could go back to Justerini and Brooks in the 18th century as one of their earliest kind of brands that they're known for. 200 years ago, Johnnie Walker coming out of Kilmarnock in 1820, right? That became one of the biggest one of the biggest brands to be associated with Diageo. But it all started in 1877 when 6 whiskey-producing companies making various styles of whiskey in Scotland realised that the power of collaboration might help them. We can say it positively, like power of collaboration, but there's other dynamics like, I hesitate to use the word cartel and things, but if they get together to help control the supply chain, let's say, help stabilize market pricing and market demands, but also find efficiencies and that type of thing. So these 6 companies got together. I've got a note of them here. I don't think it's important for you to know. Out of the 6, the one that you'll recognize today would be Hague, I imagine, 1877. Fast forward to, lots of things happening over the late 19th century, the Paterson crash, things like that, lots of attrition in Scotch whisky. It barely gets a chance to recover, but they hit the First World War and then the recession of the 1920s. Prohibition kicking in very quickly as well. Huge challenges in Scotch whisky. And during that time, more and more fallout, more and more stabilization was required. So there was a lot more kind of takeovers and mopping up and things like that happened. So in 1925, we see DCL, as they were known at the time, merging with John Walker, Buchanan, Dewar's. And that meant that Hague, Johnnie Walker, Dewar's, and Buchanan's, the biggest brands in whiskey 100 years ago, were all under the control of the same company as far back as 1925. It was Distillers Company Limited by that time. You've got the biggest organization in whiskey doing the biggest thing in whiskey that they can possibly do, and they just kind of carry on for the next 60, 70 years doing what they know best. After the Second World War, we come into what I call, and I hope that it makes some sense to a lot of you, the kind of Hollywood boom of whiskey, where, a rocks tumbler with sipping whiskey and things like that was seen as the aspirational drink of the time. And whiskey was booming. It was boom time for whiskey. One of the biggest booms that we've seen up until recently was kind of post-war up until the mid-1970s. Diageo, or Distillers Company Limited, as they were known back then, did very well through that time. However, they were quite a conservative company. They were really quite old-fashioned and stiff and stuffy and set in their ways, and they weren't exactly lighting the heather with innovation or trying to keep things fashionable or interesting. They were very stuck in their ways. That meant that when fashions changed, when other market dynamics hit them quite hard in the late 70s and early 80s, they became weaker and weaker and weaker. And that drew the attention of Guinness. So Guinness, arguably through the 1980s, through some interesting controversial tactics and strategies and things, ended up with, in the realms of aggressive acquisitions, you could say. That meant that Guinness Group managed to merge DCL, Distillers Company Limited, with the only other mega huge brand that was around at the time, Arthur Bell and Sons, Bell's Whiskey. They were merged together in the 1980s. I'm reading all this from my notes right now just to make sure I don't make mistakes. I just want to make this as quick and summarized and as succinct as I can. You don't tune into the vPub for succinct, do you? But then through various bumps and turmoil and things, certainly through the growth that we see in single malt whiskey, which doesn't really register much on Diageo's radar too much in the early days, not in terms of business share. But up in 1997, what DCL and Arthur Bell's, they became UDV, United Distillers and Vintners. They became the Guinness Group, basically. Then, through a merger between Grand Metropolitan and Guinness in the late 90s, we see the birth of modern-day Diageo. Now, Grand Metropolitan wasn't big in spirits or anything. It was hospitality, it was foodstuffs, it was all sorts of things. So there was kind of lots of sell-offs and streamlining and stuff, but they came together in 1997, and the new company, Diageo, was born. Dia from the Latin for day or every day, and geo for the Greek for world. So every day all over the world, that kind of obvious marketing company agency brought in to kind of invent a name, and that's the inspiration that they came up with. It was a bit clumsy, but it just rolls off the tongue quite easy these days, doesn't it, Diageo? So that's how they came about. I mean, there's all sorts of written down all the controversies that were involved in over the years, all the kind of sell-offs and all that stuff. I've got notes all over the desk here in front of me, but I don't think it's so important because we are sitting here in the vPub in 2025, and some of these will be made mention of throughout tonight, and others, they won't come up. They might appear in a quiz at the end, or they might have merit in future discussions and things on the vPub. But I want to look at this company that we have today that controls so much of Scotch whisky and consider us as flavour chasers, whisky botherers, geeks, enthusiasts, invested customers in this wonderful thing that whisky is. How has it affected our journey? And how specifically has it affected it positively? It's going to be slightly more challenging than I first envisioned, because recently there's been a drop about the 2025 special releases. Every year, Diageo brings out special releases. I still get excited about them. I set myself up these days with kind of thick skin and armor because I know I'm going to be disappointed by the expensive prices, sometimes a bit oddball kind of innovation for the sake of innovation, playfulness, nonsense stories and differentiation that doesn't really need to be, just good quality stuff. That would be enough. But the special releases have occasionally got some fantastic things to share, and other times it's just a bit odd. Unfortunately, in recent years, it's all far too expensive, but I was one of the few that was very, very optimistic in 2025, and not least because of things like this. Here is a statement from the new, and since September, CEO of Diageo, a guy called Nick Giangi or something, Giangiani. And in an article in the Herald recently, there was some quite interesting introspective words from Nick. And this is what was shared through that article. Let me read this out to you. For this text is quite small here on the screen. But the Herald article goes on to say, the new chief executive of Diageo, which accounts for about a third of Scotland's whisky production, has suggested the company will shed its obsession, in quotation marks, with high-priced premium products at the expense of the entry-level brands. Nick himself goes on to say, there was such an obsession with gross margin percentage that we were actually driving some of the wrong behaviours in the business. And that source is from the Herald. This is fascinating to me. We've got a company that's issued shares warning. They've seen their growth disappear. They've seen things start to contract and shrink. They've seen people's disposable income disappear. And they've been looking and saying, wait a minute, we've been obsessed, to use their words, obsessed with the margin we can make on something rather than how much we can sell at a fair price. That's what I read from that. Now, does that mean that they're going to kind of drop their premium, super premium, uber premium, ultra premium, all of that nonsense they've been chasing for years, and focus on everything else? I don't think so. In my experience, what it means is the pendulum will swing back, and there's a real risk that they'll end up back at the stack at high, sell it cheap, make much, much thinner margins, but sell much more of it, get the brands out there, that type of thing. Whereas what we've actually sensed in the last 40 years, the growth of whisky, the growth of lifestyle, the growth of enjoyment of whisky has all been about less is more. Quality over quantity, that type of thing. And we saw all the brands, not just Diageo in recent years, just vacate that middle ground. It became a vacuum. We had stack 'em high, sell 'em cheap on one end, super premiumized on the other end, and all the good stuff that brought us into whisky in the first place, that kept us in whisky, exploring and chasing whisky, just abandoned. Quality dropping, prices increasing. Everything that happens, and the dynamics are dynamics of high demand, right? Well, into that vacuum, we saw lots and lots of independent companies stepping in, smaller independent distilleries, independent bottlers, an explosion of new brands, an explosion of high quality, fairly priced, good, accessible stuff, stealing, nibbling away at the market share that could have been enjoyed by the big brands like Pernod Ricard, White & Mackay, like Diageo. Now, when I use my hands to gesture about this big vacuum and this big section of the market in the middle, stack 'em high, sell it cheap, and premium at the other end, it's much more like this, and the vacuum in the middle being very, very narrow. We're the geeks and enthusiasts and things. However, we tend to be on the cutting edge. We tend to consume and learn and understand more about the products that we're buying than any individuals in any of these individual companies. So there is value in our perspective and our knowledge. There are things to be learned from our experiences. It's another metric that they can use if they choose, if they want. This was encouraging, right? Are you encouraged to read that from the new CEO? I'm encouraged to read that. Hopefully, he won't let the pendulum swing too far back in the opposite direction. He won't cheapen everything. Hopefully, we'll see some wisdom, some craft, and some balance. I know that's naive. What are your thoughts? Glenn Duncan is saying Aquavita will be keen to see this episode on replay. Not a hater of Diageo, love many of their products, just bemusing how they go about it. Happy birthday tomorrow to Master of Quizzes, Menno. Oh wow, it's Menno's birthday tomorrow. Let's raise a wee glass for the superstar Lord Asshat himself, my friend Menno, an all-round really amazing human. Menno, many happy returns, my friend. Yeah, what's the chance of you picking this up on the replay? Yeah, I'll send you a wee direct happy birthday as well. Cheers, buddy. Thanks for everything. Thanks for pointing that out, Glenn. Whiskey we hear in Ardnahoe is saying, wow, that sounds good. Older stock and the entry-level whiskies. See, we get excited, don't we? We should know from experience not to get too excited, though. Right, Harold? Lowlander is saying, wouldn't it be great if Diageo released a similar range to Signature Vintage's 100 proof range? To be honest with you, there's no reason that they can't do that. Signature Vintage bought a lot of those stocks from producers like Diageo and including Diageo. We'll talk more about that tonight. Klitz is saying the past tense on chasing premiumization in the Diageo CEO statement might be a bit premature. I agree with you, Klitz, because after I read that Herald article, I picked up some internet rumours. Finally done is saying Aquavita, Diageo down on liquid. Diageo do own, liquid, and when allowed, they do make a good product. I agree with you, and we can see it in so many products, but we often see it from independents rather than direct from Diageo. Are the special releases worth the money, asked the Ginger Genius? No. Half price on Amazon, yes. Good whiskey, but the people making the decisions really need to read the room. We're going to touch on that, John. Michael Wood is saying, Diageo need to improve their marketing image, which conveys their business model. I'd suggest the name change, Dodgeo, perhaps. Absolutely summarising the feeling of so many of us. Chris Pollack is saying, I've had a lot of liquid from Diageo Distilleries, but they were not bottled by Diageo. It's super interesting, right? There's going to be more of that plays out. Rob is saying, Aquavita, we should consider ourselves lucky that the indie bottlers jumped into the gap in the middle ground. They are the ones that showed us amazing whiskies that we would otherwise have missed. Reb was saying they can save money on the E150A and invest on fresh casks instead of the rejuvenated casks. A lot to be said there, a lot of wisdom there, Reb. Graham Young is saying, cheers, Roy, and thanks for releasing that wonderful birthday whiskey. Got to Aquavita. Let's raise a wee glass for Graham Young, Super Barfly Graham in Canada's birthday. I kind of missed it, but kind of didn't. It was Monday of this week, wasn't it, Graham? Many happy returns, big guy. You deserve everything it brings you. Cheers. And Alistair Gray is saying, Speyside whiskey should be so far better represented. Diageo are to blame. That's coming from somebody in Speyside. Well, let's have a wee look at this. Let's take those words from the new CEO. And let's say these are terrible images here. These have just been scraped from the internet here. Apologies. I couldn't find a label for the rumoured Kleinleach 18 that we're supposed to be getting. So honestly, everything that I'm sharing with you now is kind of just guesswork and rumours because we don't have the official news releases yet. Dramface hasn't seen them. I haven't seen them. Hopefully they're imminent. It's usually this time of year every year. So we're just a wee bit ahead here with this vPub. But regardless, we've got a Singleton 17-year-old, a Chininic 8, more on that in a second. We've got a Talisker 14, Lagavulin 12, Doyun 21, Oban 12, Roselle 14. These are all pretty solid and confirmed, but there's rumours of a Kleinleach 18 as well to make it an 8th. I'll tell you more about these in a second. Have a look at these. This is when it's just difficult. It's just very, very difficult. Okay, what I should have done is just kind of not put these prices on the thing and asked you for your input. But look at these prices. I have to caveat this. TBC is there for a reason, to be confirmed. This is based on internet rumor. Please let this not be true. This is worse than it's ever been. It's moving rapidly in the wrong direction. It's ridiculous. Clynelish, 18-year-old, unknown. Let's imagine it's from bourbon casks. We hope, in order to show Clynelish off at its best, that it's an ex-bourbon, ex-refill bourbon. But that for an 18-year-old cask strength, they're asking £240. That's £100 more than it should be, in my opinion. Ridiculous price. Talisker, toasted barrels, a 14-year-old. It's slightly older. We've had a 15-year-old in the past from Talisker, but it wasn't anything like these prices. £185 for a 14-year-old Talisker. Nonsense. Rose Isle, 40-year-old refill. Remember, the Rose Isle was the kind of almost affordable releases to 12-year-olds in the last 2 years. Well, now they've decided to premiumise that as well. They're up at £175 for 2 years extra age on there. Oban, a 12-year-old ex-bourbon, bog standard, straightforward, fantastic. This is interesting. Oh dear, £50 too much. At least more than that. Chininic, 8-year-old ex-bourbon. This is not malt whiskey. This is rye. This is quite exciting for the geeks, but it's not that exciting for your average casual customer. I think they're going to have to understand what Scotch rye whiskey is and how rare it is and all of these things. Fine, it's nice that there's a torchlight product out there in order to help that happen. Hopefully it's good. Hopefully it's got a nice balance of sweetness and spice and flavour and still got some kind of character about it that suggests that it's Scotch rye and it's not just a rye whiskey. But £110 for an 8-year-old experimental whiskey, again, too expensive. Look at this. This is getting ridiculous now. Douyin 21-year-old ex-sherry. Full maturation now. This is potentially going to be quite a potent product. 21 years in sherry. 470, shut up. £470. Where is your head? Lagavulin 12-year-old. I used to pick up Lagavulin 12-year-old at 65. It went up to 75. It went up to 90. When it breached 100, I put them on boycott. I went back again, 110, 120. I went back again. Last year, 155. This year, are they reading the room? No, it's £180. Glenord, 17-year-old, in some kind of crazy mezcal refill sherry, rumoured to be £200 for a 17-year-old. I'll say it again. I'm getting very impassioned here. I'm getting annoyed. I'm getting frustrated. This is a perfect example of not reading the room. And I know that the product development lead times involved here are a long time. I know that these have been in the offing for before last year's special releases even came out. A long, long time. And for them to suddenly change the modelling and all of that and change the prices, it's very, very, no, that's the stodge and the difficulties, the structures that's put in place in a big company. If you're going to try to combat some of these dynamics and challenges that you're seeing in the marketplace, you're going to need to move more flexibly, quickly. You're going to have to be a lot more agile. Those prices, I guarantee you, virtually nothing on that list is not going to end up heavily discounted instantly. Rose Isle, Heathrow Airport, literally the same year it was released, huge discounts. Talisker, online, Amazon, other online outlets as well, less than half price. Lagavulin, 12-year-old, less than half price. Oban, less than half price. All the special releases staying on the shelves, gathering dust year after year after year after year. It's not because we're not interested in buying them and enjoying them, but because we're not going to be fleeced. Because guess what? It's not just about us making protests and boycotting and putting Diageo on the naughty step. No, there's far too much choice out there. Every boutique whiskey place you go into, every retail outlet, global travel retail, specialist retailers, doesn't matter where it is, the choice is all over the place. And it doesn't matter that your whiskey is better because nobody's going to want to open it to taste it when it's that expensive. Let's get some feedback from you before we get into the positive stuff tonight. Finally, I'm going to say nothing under a ton, bloody stupid. Justin Wan is saying, Chinook is super interesting. Let's see what it's like when it actually materialises, and hopefully not for £110. I feel the same as you. I hope that these rumours prove to be wrong. Fernando, I will be the first to step up here on a future vPub and say I was wrong. Look at these prices. Sorry for scaring you. Sorry for biting on the rumour mill, right? But that's all I have right now. Fernando saying almost all those Diageo special release labels look so forced, intended to look fresh and cool. For me, like a poor, odd copy of a compass box. Just meh. I agree with you, Fernando, and I'm going to touch on that in one of my points tonight. Gordon Burniston saying, forget the price. I can't get on board with the special releases on the basis of label artwork alone. Don't think it was possible to make that Lagavulin bottle look bad. Wallander is saying, did you get a bottle of Roselle at a bargain price on an auction last year? He's given me a bit of a, famously I paid for a 20 cl bottle and I thought it was a 70 cl. I make the mistake so that you don't have to. Thanks for reminding me, Lowlander, just when I'd forgotten about it. Rob is saying, for these prices, I'll feel no remorse when passing on these bottles. The price-performance ratio is off the charts in favour of price. Yuri is saying that these prices are rubbish. Not going to even look at them on the whiskey shelf. There is a hell of a lot of options for us to choose from. Boycott. Drew from Arizona is saying those like some Japanese prices I've seen, Roy. Lowlander is saying rant mode activated. Klitz is saying it makes you wonder why shops will do what they have to take the special releases in, because there's a lot of money into stock that might just sit there for years. Diageo have actually been prosecuted for forcing stocks through their supply chain, for forcing their distributors to take stocks in order for the corporate entity to be seen to hit targets. They've actually been legally pursued for doing that in the past. They're not unique in doing things like these. It's shareholder appeasement over the health of the company long term. David is saying these special releases are not to my budget, so out of sight and out of mind. I'm not the target of the joke. I prefer to focus on what they produce for indies and some cores that are decent. These are just perma-dusty shelfer stuff, Roy, not for us, says Greg's Whiskey Guide. Rick Johnson in San Francisco says, if China ever puts a boycott on UK imports, Diageo is screwed. Sean Cosner is saying, it must be trial balloon tactics, surely. Say it'll be 150, then when it comes out officially 110, it looks like a bargain. Sean, there's a part of me that hopes that that's the case. Fernando's saying the Open 10 2022 was bring for me a friend from Japan and was less than $100. Good liquid, just keeps it on the right price. Lowlander saying anytime. Dan, DVDW, I think it's Dan. It's David. Dan, oh no. Diageo seems to be following some of those insanely expensive independent bottlers with these rumour prices. They should follow Signatory's example instead. Okay, listen, this is just horrendous for me to see. I'm really, really frustrated. I'll caveat finally again for the third or fourth time. Rumours, in my opinions. If it transpires to be something different, I'll be the first to step up and share it with everyone. There is some positivity out there. We need to put the positive wheels back on this. Look at these two. It's still out there today. On the left-hand side here, we've got Dalwhinnie. On the right-hand side, we've got Clynelish 14. Now, some of you might decide that, yeah, this is something I'd like to pick up, whether others have already done it in the past. And maybe you'll pick it up in the future. Maybe it's on your shelf right now. But I put it to you right now. This is really jarring, isn't it? We've got one of the most loved Highland distilleries on the right there at 14 years old and 46%, at £55. And on the left-hand side, we probably, arguably one of the best value single malt whiskies in existence with Dalwhinnie, 43% admittedly, £55 for a 15-year-old Highland single malt. Both Highlanders. Okay, Dalwhinnie could be, depending on how they want to self-refer, they could be a Speyside as well. But this is odd, isn't it, that you can pick these up. And I don't mean this is on special offer or something like that. This is generally widespread, £55. So isn't that weird? Now, it looks like I'm arguing for these two to be more expensive. But when we've got these out there, and when we've got similarly aged things from Diageo at exorbitantly higher pricing, it just doesn't make sense. It makes no sense. And immediately as a consumer, you look at it and you start to understand it a wee bit more. If Diageo has done their job well and brought you into whiskey and got you interested in whiskey, and you start to learn a little bit about whiskey, you can then look at it with much more wise decision-making ability. And things, the pricing from Diageo, premiumizing purely through price and nothing else, not making the quality better, not making the value better, nothing, just about price, is very, very quickly spotted. Anyway, now it's time to get on with the positive stuff. Reb is saying latest Clynelish 14s have been a bit bland and no waxiness, won't buy again. Yeah, a couple of them have been really quite sweet, haven't they? A little bit overcooked, a lot more first fill bourbon in there, I would say. And have we lost some of that waxiness? The waxiness tends to needs to be in the original distillate. And it's best shone through refill casks, less active casks, with teenage amount of years. It should be able to be achieved. I've actually got a lovely Clynelish in this glass right now, and there is a bit of waxiness there. It's not overly waxy, it's only 8 years old, but I'm going to share more about this Clynelish in a wee minute. The Clynelish has lost its waxiness, says Rob. It isn't what it used to be. At £55 is still overpriced in my opinion. The price stayed the same, the quality, however, did not. Quality and price, I can see how over time. So if the Clynelish had a lot of investment, a lot of upgrades and things like that, and I know that the spirit wobbled for a while. They had issues with their fermentation vessels. They had issues with the process in general and trying to keep the Clynelish character and things. We could be sitting here 14 years down the line and consuming the product of those changes those years ago. I still hold out for Clynelish to come back in the future. Might be Rob again. I'm being a wee bit naive there. Fancy being a Diageo marketer guy, taking a tour through one of their distilleries. Scalding looks from the teams who make the stuff they handle so poorly. Hey, that's if the people who make it are informed kind of whiskey folks as well, lovers of whiskey. I know a lot of them are. And I think that's what's heartbreaking, Arnie, is that we love the distilleries. We love visiting the distilleries. We love getting to know the people who work there. We fall in love with these places. So when it's mishandled, as you say, it can be difficult. Positive time. Now I'm going to come to you with bigger picture stuff. I'm going to come to you with things that are going to celebrate the existence of Diageo, the existence of the products that they've brought to us. The privilege that we have of sitting here being able to criticize Clynelish today versus how it used to be, when the alternative would have been never having tasted that in the past. In a different alternate existence where some things in the past never happened. I think everyone knows what the first thing I'm going to bring up on screen to talk about is, and of course we're going back to 1988, and we talk about the arrival of the Classic Malts. This is seismic. I don't know. I think it might be difficult for me, despite all the hyperbole that you tune into from time to time on the vPub from me. It's difficult for me to overstate the impact that the Classic Malts had in 1988. Imagine the scenario. We've got Macallan out there. It's established and known. Glenfiddich's probably been out there for 25 years already. Glenmorangie's out there. There are lots of other brands as well. Talisker, Speyside brands, Glenfarclas. Ardbeg is going to be out there. There's going to be lots of known brands of Scotch whisky that are incidentally single malt. But not everyone understands that they're single malt. Glenlivet back in the time would have been just called pure malt, as an example. Malt, what does malt actually mean? Malt, I kind of know what malt is as a thing, and I know about beer and things, but on a bottle of whiskey, what does that mean? Because all of these malt whiskies were sold in the exact same presentation as the blend market that they were sold alongside. You could argue that they were attempting to cannibalize, actually. They weren't treated differently as malt. No, they were packaged and sold and the legal minimum 40% ABV, 43 for export, sure. They were chill filtered, all of the stuff was happening. There wasn't enough distinction. This is malt whiskey. It's a different product and it's different for these reasons. But things did start to change. Independent bottlers were leading the charge. Cadenhead's, Gordon MacPhail been around for a long time. But in 1983, Scotch Malt Whisky Society comes out and everything's at cast strength. Nothing is chill filtered, no colour is added to anything. And they lead not with brand, but they lead with flavour. And the impact that SMWS and brands like that bringing out that style of product. Glenfarclas, obviously the 108 came out in the 60s, 105, sorry, came out in the 1960s. This brought a different light to whiskey consumption. Whiskey wasn't a long drink, a cocktail base anymore. It wasn't something that you just filled over a tumbler full of ice. Whiskey was suddenly something that was charged with individual character and flavour. So instead of just drinking mindlessly, people were slowing down. People were tasting rather than drinking. We see the rise and the growth of single malt whiskey through the 70s and the 80s. And then in 1988, Diageo spots this. It was DCL, it wasn't Diageo back then, but they spot this. And I know some of the names that were involved back then, I think potentially people like Mike Collings and others, and potentially people actually like, I've got his book over my shoulder here, like Nick Morgan. Might be a wee bit just before next time, I'm not sure. I might be aging him a wee bit. They spot this and they bring us this amazing concept. Amazing to me, at least. This is the original Diageo Classic Malts of 1988. Now look at that Dalwhinnie on the right-hand side there. I think that is a classic. I think that's one of the original brandings, but it's still almost identical today. Talisker's moved on a little bit, but still absolutely recognisable. Cragganmore hasn't changed a bit. Oban hasn't changed a bit. Lagavulin 16 hasn't changed a bit. And on the left-hand side there, the only change that we see with the Glenkinchie bottle, I think I've brought a bottle down, actually. Did I not? Yes, I did. Here we have one of the originals from that lineup, a Glenkinchie 10-year-old classic malt from the 1980s. Now, this would get an upgrade. This became Glenkinchie 12-year-old, and it stayed a 12-year-old for about, I don't know, a good 30-plus years now. But what this concept did, especially when it was displayed on that little plinth and bars everywhere, why are there 6 different malt whiskies? Well, wait till you taste them. The Dalwhinnie versus the Cragganmore versus the Talisker versus the Lagavulin. It was regional based, of course it was, and it was there to highlight that character, the different character and flavours in whiskey. But what it actually shared was just the contrast that could be achieved from mashing, fermenting, and distilling barley. And the flavours were tremendously different. Bear in mind, in 1988, the industry's on its knees and there's a whiskey loch behind them. So the stocks that they were pulling from back then were much deeper. Potentially, there was a lot of overaging went on. So in the Lagavulin 16, it might not have been purely 16-year-old malt in that bottle. Maybe it was vatted with some older stuff. And in fact, if you go back in time, here's an original 1980s bottle of Lagavulin White Horse, 16-year-old. You can tell by the gold foil labelling there, the by appointment thing on the top. There's some other little kind of hints and differences that you can see from the modern Lagavulin bottle. But if I held this up for a second, and then I held this up, what do you notice? This is a new bottling. You might notice that this is a litre bottle. It's incidental. But these are almost the same. You know, we've lost the kind of bootstrap thing over the top, right? We've lost that. Or watch strap sticker, this is called. But generally, it looks identical to today. That's fabulous. How impactful is this branding? How evocative is this branding? How perfectly pitched is this branding? Something that came along in 1988 that would have looked neither retro nor modern. In 1988, that was pitched perfectly, and it still looks utterly perfect today, in my opinion. When everyone's all too eager to, let's update it, let's make it look, well, let's bring it up to date, and just leave the stuff alone. These things are cyclic, and what looks faded and jaded now, just give it a couple of years, it's going to come right back in again. You're not quite surprised how little actually the branding has changed on those classic malts. For me, it's fascinating to see that. Even the Glenkinchie, when it's changed from 10 to 12, it's still in the same shaped bottle, still vaguely the same kind of design language, stuff like that. It's amazing to see the impact that these whiskies had on the mass market, on the casual whiskey drinker, people that were just going into their bars and their pubs and their hotels and whatever, and seeing that selection and playing with whiskey. How many of us fell in love with whiskey through expressions such as these? Jeffrey Byers is saying, all right, barflies, I'll have to catch you on replay. Rest assured, I'll be leaning on the crowd for the quiz. So you're going to pick up the live chat on replay, which is something that everyone can do. Jeffrey, thanks for hanging out with us tonight, buddy. It's nice to see you in. Pedro is saying, leaving for now, a tasting, and we'll catch up on replay until next week, barflies. Wherever you're going over there in Brazil, Pedro, I hope the tasting looks after you. Have a good time. And now that you're back here watching it on the replay, buddy, it's nice to have you back. Greg and Francis saying, one has to admit they did a great educational work with the classic malts range, especially in bars and restaurants. Even if the Campbelltown region was skipped, they didn't have a distillery. Aquavita, a lot of newcomers started there. And when the classic malts were launched in 1988, Springbank was the only distillery still trading, and back then it hadn't taken control fully of its own destiny quite yet. Dorpass Whiskey is saying, cheers, Ryan, everyone. At work, so we'll catch this later. You Skyver, Tim. Nice of you to drop in to say hello, buddy. Hope work's not too hard for you. And Reb is saying, I used to own their miniature classic malts gift pack. Great education back in the late 90s. Oops, just as it jumps. Clutch is saying it, except for the gaudy orange horror that is the new Talisker branding. Yeah, I feel just keep it the same as it was. They messed it up. They messed it up. It's not terrible. It's not ugly, but it's not as pretty as it was. You forced it. Doodle the Drama saying, I don't know what Klein Leash used to be like, but I'm convinced all the wax they flushed out just went into Glen Elgin. From refill, it's my personal corner post of paraffin notes. Rob is saying, I was way back in 91 at the Flora Fauna series when visiting the Glenkinchie distillery that really put me on my whiskey journey. So I do owe some thanks to Diageo. Okay, Rob, it's nice of you to admit, and also age yourself and let us know just how long you've been into whiskey. You might hear more of that later on tonight. Hellswood is saying at home from his shift. Andy's home from his shift. Poured himself a wee dram up in Romac 9-year-old. Pete Smoke, I'm off to bed, so we'll leave you in his capable hands. Good night, you all. So we know if Hellswood's in playing the quiz at the end tonight, we know it's Andy flying solo this evening. Get well soon, Helen, won't you? And we'll see you soon. Tommy Elmer is saying, how could they call them Classic Collection if they changed the bottles? By the way, they were launched. This was all of this branding was new. The Talisker that existed before 1988 was very different. The Lagavulin was a 12-year-old. It existed in different branding. So this branding appeared, but they called the classic malts. But yeah, the brand was all brand new, absolutely. So I take your point. Bob Sander is saying they also had a passport to encourage you to visit each distillery, get it stamped, and claim a free dram. That's right. Actually, the first passport I ever had, the free thing that you got was, I don't know if it was made of pewter or whatever, but it was apparently a quaich, one of these traditional two-handled sipping cups. Maybe it ended up being a dram later on. These things always getting shitified a wee bit. They get choked back. And things don't get better. Things always get worse in the favour of margin and profit and cutbacks. So yeah, you're absolutely spot on. I put it to you, I put it to all of you, that the classic malts It would be difficult to find a more impactful thing that happened to malt whisky enjoyment. Maybe the growth of independent bottling, maybe SMWS, maybe Cadenhead's, Gordon MacPhail, those types of companies. Maybe you could argue Glenfiddich in the 1960s, stepping forward as a pure malt. You could argue these were seismic things. But when Classic Malts happened in 1988, the timing was perfect because people were ready to start learning about this concept of what single malt could actually be. Let's move quickly on to the second point. We've already started to touch upon it. You've got a company producing today close to 40% of all the Scotch whisky produced. Now that percentage has changed over time, but even back in the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, they were always the biggest company in various shapes and forms. But something that was always part of Scotch whisky was cask trading, brokerages, wholesale sales of bulk whisky, sometimes as new fillings, tankers, that type of thing, but mostly in cask. And that meant that through some bigger picture thinking, Diageo, DCL, United Distillers and Vintners, whatever you want to call them, over the years, were one of the most influential, and thank goodness for it, at enabling an independent bottling scene. Anybody that's watched Independent Bottlers documentary would have picked up on dynamics like this. You can pick that up on Amazon Prime, by the way. It's just simply called Independent Spirits, a whiskey film, I think. But it's available on English-speaking countries right now over Amazon Prime Video. It's a who's who of who's in whiskey. And through interviews, individual interviews, you get this kind of arc, this story arc of the really quite interesting and difficult to describe dynamics that makes a space for independent bottlers. The independent I've got in a glass tonight is something from Diageo. Well, the malt is. It's an 8-year-old from Single Malts of Scotland. Hey, I've had this bottle a couple of years now. This is not that expensive. It's 48% ABV. So this is like a small batch. This is not single cask at all. In fact, they call this, by batch, they call it parcel numbers, the releases on this one. And it's from Elixir. Really quite good. It's a little bit young for me for Clynelish. I would like Clynelish to get into the teenage years to be better. But this is fantastic sipping whiskey for the price I paid for it. I think this was £45, something of that order. I'd love to say that we're getting bags of wax, but the wax is only there if you're looking for it and searching for it. I don't think it's a foot forward on this particular batch. But it's still a good quality, quite pure, easy to enjoy Highland malt. I could have held up the thing that's getting mentioned regularly tonight, the Signatory 100 proof series right now. £40 to £50 for most of it. Fantastic quality, fantastic value. Some of them's really amazing. Other ones are not so amazing, but still good. Every single bottle, annoyingly, thankfully, is better than the official stuff. And better priced too. How can that exist? Well, it exists because product development people get involved, marketers get involved, all of these kind of experts in their field get involved, but maybe don't know that much about whiskey. And sometimes they get it absolutely right and they do a fantastic job. These are all professionals, but other times they make such a hash of it that it's destined to fail from the get-go. They render things niche when they should be celebrated. Independent bottlers don't do that. They don't focus on the brand. They don't focus on super pretty labeling. They focus on smaller batch, smaller outturns, doing the absolute best that they can at the best price that they can. They want your repeat business. They want you drinking it. Most of the independent bottling companies out there, in my experience, in my opinion, are owned by whiskey fans. The industry out there doing the official side of things could do with having a lot more people who love whiskey working within their walls, I think. However, some weird alchemy has been happening over the decades within the walls of Diageo, because there remain today canny, wise, bigger picture people in place who have the ability to make really fundamental decisions over stocks, who can get a hold of those stocks, for what purpose, and what they can do with them. Sometimes I feel it's a wee bit too conservative. We can't sell Clynelish as Clynelish. We've got to call it something else. And that's because of brand preservation and all of those protectionist type things. And they don't seem to realize just how much these independent bottlers can elevate the standing, the reputation, the engagement, the experience with a brand such as Clynelish, so that when people do see the official bottling, they're like, oh, well, we always know that that's rock solid, that's good. I would argue that over the years, with very few exceptions, we can regularly get better examples of the malt from independent bottlers, independent companies, than we can direct from the official releases. So forget about prices. The batch variation, the different people employed to do the different things, is so variable that the end product ends up being so variable. We're not casual whiskey sippers. We notice it because we fall in love with the product, we fall in love with the spirit, and we pick up batch after batch after batch. We taste the gradual drift, and we certainly change the big step changes that can happen. I am grateful, very, very grateful, that some wise heads within Diageo, over the years, are still releasing some fantastic quality spirit as new make, as very young spirit in cask, as more mature spirit in cask, all of it out there into the landscape, so that we can all recognize the reasons that we love those distilleries. We all talk about how I've moved on from Diageo now. I don't buy the official bottlings. No, I buy James Eady. I buy Signatory Vintage. I buy Adelphi. I buy Cadenheads. It doesn't, you could go on and on and on. Wait, all the malt that's making all of these companies are enabled by the availability of that bulk stock. The movie I've just mentioned to you, Independent Bottlers, the Independent Spirits, the whiskey film, that talks hugely about the role that independents have played in developing the whiskey scene and making it such a vibrant and flavour-forward, quality-chasing scene. But I think not a lot is mentioned about weight. But without all of these stocks being made available in the first place, none of these independent bottlers could exist, because independent distillers is a very recent phenomenon, actually. David in Portugal is saying, like Columbus was accused of not doing a great thing, since America was there to be discovered, it would also be easy to keep single malts as ingredients, since the consumption was for blends. I think that's absolutely true. That didn't happen. Justin Wan is saying, Clynelish, also known as Secret Highland, Diageo is scared that the independents will represent their own whiskies better. I think that's why they regulate the names. I don't think that that's the fear, but I think there is fear. Fear's the right word, but maybe not for that reason. I think that they're actually afraid that the independents will misrepresent their brand. That's the justification often, but they don't understand the goals and the motivations and the dynamics. Joe Smith is saying, I started the vPub with a Flora Fauna Diluent, then poured a James Eady Diluent, half the price and better specs. So point taken, sir. Comes from the same place as well, Joe, doesn't it? And we can't make that argument really about small scale for Flora Fauna, I think, because all the James Eady stuff is even the small batch stuff is very small scale. Rob is saying, I think the difference is that then these are focused on whiskey instead of focusing on profit, like the big players in the industry. You're right, Rob. But these indies need to make money. They need to be around for the next outturn. They need to be around for the next year. They have to make profit. And they're able to do that. But there are very few indies out there, certainly very few indies that we celebrate and like to rave about, that are out there just gouging. And we see a lot of gouging coming from official quarters, don't we? Which brings us nicely on to my third thing that I want to be grateful to Diageo for. And it's going to be the first of, maybe might be the only uncorking tonight, actually, thinking about it. But I'm going to finally open this tonight. I've had a kind of mood shift recently where I'm being less precious about some bottles. And one of these bottles is going to go opened. And on theme, I'm just going to go right ahead and open the obvious one based on your discussion and your feedback tonight. But my fetish, one of the things that I love in whiskey generally, is just such a pretty thing that I'm so glad it exists. Yes, I would like it to be better, but I love it, and I always have loved it. I've loved it since I first understood what it was, and I'm talking about Diageo's Flora and Fauna series. I think this was a Mike Collins thing, I'm not sure, but early 90s. What we had, the classic malts were looking after the distilleries. The distilleries became brands. People knew Lagavulin, people knew Talisker, that type of thing. And then they said, well, wait a minute. We've got all these other distilleries out there, and the people that work there can't even taste the liquid. How hard would it be for us to release something from all of our distilleries, even if it was just very small scale and small batch? And that's how Flora and Fauna was born. That's how it came about. Now, it did not get the name Flora and Fauna for that reason. I have no idea what Diageo would have originally called that. I think I've read about it in the past and just no recollection of it, but it was something vanilla. It was the distillery collection or something like that. It was Michael Jackson, the whiskey writer in the 1990s, that dubbed this entire range Flora and Fauna because of the labels. Here is a Benrinnes, and famously it's a Capercaillie that's on the front of a Benrinnes bottle. 15-year-old, all the Flora and Fauna, the official Flora and Fauna. There was a cast strength series at one point, but the Flora and Fauna of today and for the last 30 odd years since 1992 is 43% ABV. Benrinnes, quite a tasty whiskey, quite a lot of body and weight and shape and heft to it. What else have I got here, Flora and Fauna wise? Here's one of the ones I'm going to potentially consider opening. It won't be this one though. This is a Kalila. You know, it's got a downgrade when it was released as an official bottling. It stayed at 43%, but dropped down to 12 years old as part of the extended classic malts. When they dropped to Flora and Fauna, it was a 15-year-old. But the opposite happened with Clynelish. The modern day Clynelish is 46% ABV and 14 years old, whereas the Flora and Fauna, as you can see here, back in the day, 14 years old and 43%. This is the one I'm going to open tonight. We've all been talking about Clynelish and the waxiness and things like that. I've got a nice wee Capita here just waiting for this. I bought this in Italy. I walked into a specialist retailer in Italy about maybe a decade ago now. I'll have to look back on my Instagram to work out when I was in Italy. But I think 2015, 2016, something of that order. And the whole rack was just full of Flora and Fauna. Most of it I could get in the UK, even although some of it had really quite older, dustier bottles and things. But there was a couple, like the Kalila and this. You can see the Italian stamp on this. You see that says Aquavite, slightly different spelling. But I like their use of the V instead of a U there. It's the Italian tax stamp on there. There's no date or anything, and if there was, it's kind of been worn away or washed off or whatever. But I picked up the Clynelish from that wee shop, and I picked up the Kalila. I'm just going to try and take this off as best I can because, you know, there's a wee ceremony of opening this after it's been in the bottle for more than 20 years. This would have been. It's not going to work. What I should have done is just leave the tax stamp on there and just tear the foil around it. Can I get to the foil? Yes, I can. Picked the wrong day to trim your fingernails, right? The wee craft knife is always on hand. See if we can tear through that tax stamp. Yeah. Good job. So this has been a decade in opening. Ah, wouldn't you just know it? A broken cork. That's what happens with these things. When it's been in bottle for so long, I'll push it through, I'll empty it out, I'll get the string in, I'll get the cork out, I'll filter it, decant it, all that stuff. That can happen later tonight or tomorrow. We can still get into the whiskey. I did that as gently as I could there. But that's what happens with natural corks. As long as it's been stored, I believe this to have been stored upright. Unfortunately, you do get drying of corks when that happens. As long as I've had it, it's getting stored upright as well. But straight into the glass it goes. I don't know how I feel about this being open. Everything is about how the liquid is, right? Setting it free. Graham Fraser is saying we should also be grateful for Diageo for maintaining the largest number of distilleries with worm tubs. It's one of the points down here. Out of the 30 distilleries, 10 of Diageo's distilleries, a third of them, have worm tubs. You might remember the story of the late 80s, early 90s. Can't remember now, where they've removed the worm tubs from Dalwhinnie, put in shell and tube condensers. Completely changed the character of the whiskey. It doesn't matter what they did to try and recover it. They had to just eventually rip out the shell and tube, and at great expense reinstall the worm tubs, and it taught them a hard lesson about messing around with tradition, I think. There's going to be a few wee crumbs in this, but yeah. Clynelish 14, Flora Fauna. Cheers, everyone. Okay, immediately there's a whiff of old bottle effect on this one. I think this is really quite old. This has maybe been since the 1990s even. The Flora and Fauna labelling, the older bottles have got this kind of paler, almost closer to white label on it, like this, rather than a slightly more yellower. No batch or whatever. There's a virtually unreadable bottle code on it, I think, but I'm not going to look at it with these glasses on. But you get past that. There's lovely, lovely beeswax and honey. Runny honey. But there's also a wee bit of a kind of, and it's suggestive of maybe the old bottle effect, but there's a wet mulch thing. It's sweet though, a sweet mulch. It's like reminiscent of kicking wet leaves, but there's a sweetness in there too, like honey and toffee and wet earth, but we're not in mushroomy. Everything is sweeter and more kind of fragrant. A little bit outdoorsy, definitely. Dried fruit, but also some kind of ripe orchard, sweet pear. But this is, it's 14 years on the bottle, but this is old whiskey. It noses like it's old. And I don't just mean that OBE, that old bottle effect. It's nosing old. Mouth-watering. Sláinte. Oh. Good. So it's softer than you imagine on arrival. Might even hint at worried first initial arrival. There was a panic that it might be a bit watery. Then immediately you got this nice vibrance cutting through. And underneath that vibrance, holding that vibrance together was, yes, a waxy character. I suspect that this is not able to express quite as much as it would at a slightly higher ABV. 43% is a little bit tight for this. A little bit low, I think. But it's very, very elegant and poised. There's a long finish on here, but the finish is dominated, I think, by an old bottle effect thing. I think it needs a little bit of time to maybe exercise that, just to air a little bit. If we talk about neck pours, I think this is potentially a neck pour. It's been 25 years in the waiting, maybe longer. After all that effort trying to preserve the tax stamp, and I break the cork, right? I've got plenty of corks. Plenty Flora and Fauna corks. It's elegant, it's light. Arguably a bit too light. Still good stuff. And it's nice that it's opened. Very nice that it's opened. Let's see how it changes over time. I think everyone knows by now that they've been watching my channel for long enough that have a fetish for Flora and Fauna bottles. There's a lot of the ones that you can buy and pick up today. Chinook 10, for example, that's just a knockout little charmer of a whiskey. Andy King is saying, if I was a corporate multinational and I wanted to get into the hearts of enthusiasts, I would sell casks to the independent bottlers and forego the costs of bottling and distributing something for them. So moving to a wholesale model, I think, but it's the way that it often was selling to blenders back in the day. Daniel Key is saying, where's the Speyburn Flora and Fauna, Roy? If I had a Speyburn Flora and Fauna, Daniel, I guarantee you I would not be opening it on the vPub. He's referencing something that there was famously only ever one batch of back in the day. Greg's Whiskey Guide is saying, in the Rosebank, Roy, the one Ralphie brought you someday on the vPub, and that would be probably the best Flora and Fauna trio there was. Yeah. The Rosebank was an absolute cracker. Still around there. Prices have dropped a wee bit. Still expensive. You'd be tasting history, I suppose. Kyle Haler is saying, pro tip, 2 corkscrews and apply it at opposite pressure. Never failed for me on a broken cork. Everybody's got their own little kind of ceremony that they go through. Justin Wan is saying, leave the cork, let it disintegrate, and let the remnants come out of the bottle in the future. Remind you of this very moment. I think I'll take care of this tonight, buddy, if you don't mind. Harrow is saying, just use a plastic bag to get it out. You could also clean the bottle and reuse it. Oh, I'm absolutely going to reuse a bottle, no question. Rob is saying, I have the exact same fetish. The Benrinnes is a staple in my collection and the one whiskey that hooked me on whiskey. Every sip brings back the memory of that moment. We've all got these little kind of emotional hooks and fetishes. I wonder how many of them. I'm going to do a couple of polls tonight. I'm just going to stick a couple of polls in and ask you to interact and see what you see on a couple of these things. Let's try an obvious thing here, easy thing. Start a poll, just get a yes or no answer here. If Flora and Fauna was natural, it would become permashelf. Potentially become, let's say potentially. Still has to be put together well. Yes, no. Do you agree? So I'll put that poll in and I'll just say to you, if the Flora and Fauna series was natural, instead of being 43%, it was 46 or above, 48 maybe. They didn't chill filter it. They didn't add color. They just went with this concept, this beautiful concept, beautiful packaging. Everything about it stays the same. The pricing stays fair. You know, we don't want cheap whiskey. We want good whiskey. But if it was natural, would you consider, despite all the range that we have today, would you consider Flora and Fauna as a permashelf item for you? Bear in mind that Flora and Fauna has a limited market reach as well. If you're in the States, for example, it can be very, very hard to come by. But if you're in Europe or the UK, you'll have stumbled across Flora and Fauna in your time. From the land of the cork. Hope no hard feelings, lol, says David in Portugal. And no hard feelings, buddy. I don't think there was anything I could have done there to... I was gentle. It was just, it gave way very, very easily, very quickly. It happens all the time, and I should know it's happened on the vPub before. Whiskey Mechanic is saying, I voted no before you mentioned the price being fair. Oh dear. So there's at least one no in there. That shouldn't be a no, potentially. So there we go. One of my wee fetishes in whiskey. As I move on to my fourth point, I'm going to share with you another one of my it's like I love that I can't forget. I can never untaste the taste that I first experienced it back in 2009. I was already into whiskey. I had a decent collection going on. I wasn't in love with the peaty stuff, but my brother and I went on a west of Scotland trip with the families, and we bought a little 20 cl of Lagavulin 16, and it transformed everything. You could argue this channel wouldn't exist. I wouldn't have all of you as friends. I wouldn't have this as a job. I wouldn't, nothing that I enjoy today, it seems, in whiskey would exist if it wasn't for, it's empty now, this little 20 cl bottle of Lagavulin 16. Do you see how gorgeous that even looks, even at that tiny scale? I always talk about and I complain about the changing quality, the flavour drift of Lagavulin over the years. I don't know how much of that is because of the change in the liquid. It's definitely the case. And how much of it is a change in me and my experience and the things that I'm enjoying. But I still love it, and it's always on the shelf. It's always on the shelf. When the price jumped ridiculously high, we all had it on the shelf and we just stopped buying it. And what happens is now the continually on sale whiskey. Nobody pays full price for Lagavulin because every specialist, every supermarket, every online retailer that sells it, we just wait and then the price drops. It's on a flash sale. It's on a super permanent deal, whatever. And we get it much closer to the price that it should have originally been at. It's unfortunate that clumsiness harms a brand like that because it's not a good look when it's on permanent discount. That's not what it's supposed to convey. Lagavulin is one of the most precious malts on the planet. Putting it in a diluted form, artificially jacking the price only to put it on constant sale, is just abuse. Abuse to a brand, a distillery, a heritage, a culture. It's abuse. However, my fourth point that I am grateful to Diageo for is Lagavulin 16. I held it up to you earlier here. I'm not going to pour the White Horse edition, you know, the ancient one from back in the day. I'm going to pour a wee glass of Lagavulin 2025, contemporary Lagavulin. This bottle has been open a wee while, but I think it's maybe been in the vPub for a couple of years. But I reach for this from time to time, and I've got friends that appear that absolutely adore this stuff and would still, a lot of them to this day, talk about how this remains their favourite whiskey. It was so impactful back in the day, so impactful. Good morning from sunny Perth, Western Australia, says Dave Shaw. I hate to say, but yesterday I saw Laga 16 on the shelf, 279 Australian dollars. It stayed on the shelf, Dave. It really did, didn't it? Because it's not worth that. We're picking it up in the UK now, constantly on sale. If I was to do a quick internet search right now, let's just type it in, Lagavulin 16. I bet you one of these place outlets is a discount. So here we go. Yep. So if you go onto Master of Malt, it's currently $81.95. I think there's a good chance you could have bought it at 65 quid. Heading as a wines, 65 quid. It's all over the place. Prices are all over the place. Tesco's got it at 106. So it's just, that's messy. They've lost control of their product, their market, their price. It's just a mess. And it's a mess born out, agreed. I'm going to end this poll now because it's been rock solid on 81%. Flora Fauna was natural. 80% of you would consider putting it on the shelf. Doesn't mean too much there, but that's pretty much what I would have imagined. We're not going to see 80% for this next poll, but I think it's going to be an interesting question to ask. Start a poll. Lagavulin 16 has been has made a significant impact at some point in my whiskey journey. Lagavulin 16 has made a significant impact at some point in my whiskey journey. Start poll. Because I have a theory, and we're testing it out right now. I was transformed from a casual whiskey drinker, somebody who was curious and buying whiskey and enjoying it, to an experience I had in my kitchen late one night. I've told the story many times. We've been fishing, all stuff. It's this bottle, this tiny bottle, and almost the last dram from this. Last dram of the night, just kind of, and I took a taste and I held it on my palate, and I held it and I held it and I swallowed it, and it was amazing. Is the quality in 2009, 2010 bottles much, much better than today? Potentially. Certainly a 20cl could have been in that shop we bought it from for a long time as well. Could have been even older. But objectively, given the fact this is 43% whiskey, coloured, chill filtered, all of that stuff, this is still an attractive thing. It nose is lovely. It's aromatic. It's gorgeous. It's smoky, but it's soft smoke. It's warm smoke. Cheers. And my theory is that we're testing right now with that poll is that it's been such an impactful single malt. The most potent weapon I have used over the years to evangelize all my friends into whiskey. And it's flavor. It is flavor. It's nothing to do with the branding that I love so much. It's nothing to do with the heritage and the culture that we're making mention of here tonight. It's everything to do with flavor. It is such a classic, iconic single malt Scotch whiskey. Hellswood is saying never had a bottle of the 16-year-old in the house. The 8-year-old, the Game of Thrones release, and the Distilleries editions are the only lags we currently have, much better for our palates than the 16-year-old. Distillers edition isn't that far away from it, if we're honest though, Heather. Overland Rams is saying negatory, good buddy. I think Lager 16 was already expensive and neutered by the time I rediscovered Scotch. Now Ardbeg's Oogie. Now we're talking about that kind of impact. Cheers, Chuck. Petehead is saying, have appreciated Lager 16. Notice the past tense, but certainly never has impacted me in my whiskey journey. I think you could be, in, despite being Petehead, you could be in the minority. We'll wait and see. Greg's Whiskey Guide is saying, my answer is yes. I tried my first lager 16-year-old abroad in the USA 2 decades ago, and it was the first refined and elegant Islay I tried. Well, I did struggle with Ardbeg 10 and even Lafroig 10. Interesting, Greg. Alistair is saying, Lagavulin 12 brought a tear to my eye. The taste and smell brought me back to when I was little, walking into my grandparents' house, walking into the bathroom, TCP in the cabinet. Justin Wan is saying, I still no Linkwood so far. Travesty. We might need to have a follow-up session to feature Linkwood, Justin. You can go to bed, buddy. Gordon Burniston is saying, Lagavulin was my first Diageo distillery tour. Was concerned it might have a slight Diageo corporate stiffness. Was relieved to find it super relaxed and full of Islay charm. And I hope that it retains it. I mean, so much of that came off the back of Ian MacArthur. But there was a culture, there was a relaxed, laid back, as you say, Islay charm, Gordon. Is there any way they can preserve that? Because as soon as the agencies get involved, as soon as the experienced people get involved, all that goes to crap. It's just lost, and it's suddenly barriers appear when there shouldn't be any. They were never there before. Alistair Gray saying, continued memory I never had before. Talking about that 12-year-old on the TCP. Clutch to saying, I came into whiskey too late for Lagavulin 16 to be the bottle that was easily accessible price-wise, so I put it off and went down the indie route before I ever bought a 16. and I still haven't. I think you represent a hell of a lot of people like the Arnies of this world. And I think a comment I just read out a wee minute ago, Tim is saying Lagavulin 16 and the Distillers editions made a big impact on me around 2013. Been drinking whiskey for years, but not like that. Always got a soft spot for them. Justin is saying, I'm not going to bed just yet. You're stuck with me tonight. Ebhead, my pal Rolf has bought me a dram. Thank you very much. It's just appeared there. I wonder if I missed it earlier or if it's just come in now. He said, I am reminding me of some good Diageo moments. So I found my Talisker 8 from 2018. Oh, it's a peach. And back at the back of the cupboard, an Aquavitae Classic, still alive and kicking, Slancheroy. That 2018 special releases Talisker 8 was an absolute banger. Was that the last year that we got stuff out of Diageo that we actually loved? Alistair McPhail has bought me a dram as well, saying a wee dram, Roy. It can be Diageo if you want. I'm in topic with a Thompson Brothers Manic More 12 and a Balblair 18. Gutted I can't give you a dram on Sunday. Thanks for the Ardnahoe and all you do, buddy. Thanks for all you do for me, Alistair. And I know that you are sad about not getting to Peter's on Sunday, but we'll see each other soon. Rolfie, I'll see you at Peter's on Sunday. It's only a legitimate event if Rolfie's there. Cheers to you both. Thank you for your drams. I think the final thing I'm going to share with you tonight is going to surprise you. Ian Graham, saying Aquavitae Lagavulin 16 has been replaced in my cabinet by Kilchoman Sanic and Loch Orm these days. I think that's too often the story amongst us all, Ian. Hellswood is saying, absolutely loving seeing so many barful. This is Andy, I think, of course. Helen's away. And wonderful whiskey folks of late in the wee tune. Been brilliant. Anyone else heading down to the Kintyre Peninsula soon other than Daisy? Peter, Daisy, I think she's in tonight. Is she heading down to Campbelltown? Peter Hunt is saying, I've got the Lager Distillers edition on the shelf. Think it may arrive at Kwangtung on Sunday after this chat. And Graham Fraser is saying, remember trying Lager 12 at the Fisheel at its launch around 2002. That's how long Graham has been chasing whiskey. Amazing the difference from the 16-year-old. And Arnie is saying, Lager is one of those I have skipped buying so far, but the way before I got into whiskey, it was one that burned itself into my head when my father-in-law gave me one to try. Well, you can still pick this up on sale. The prices that's been asked for it, up close to and over on £100. No, sorry, the whiskey needs to be better than that, Diageo. You can't just price it and make it seem so. Okay, let's close this poll. Lagavulin 16 has made a significant impact at some point in my whiskey journey. 59%. 50, that's over half. I knew it would be high. I was expecting, a third, maybe a push, a quarter of a third of you. So we're talking closer to 2/3 of you. It's like a significant impact. The impact that it did on me and so many of my friends. Probably that 2/3 thing stands actually when I speak about my personal circle of evangelism. Thank you all so much for indulging a wee bit in the polls tonight. 131 of you voting in the polls. I didn't catch what the earlier poll was in terms of, there it is. I won't scroll all the way back. Okay. So we've had the Classic Malts. We've had their enabling of the independent scene. We've had Flora and Fauna and everything that did for us to access all of these distilleries that would have otherwise just been off-radar workhorses and nothing more. And Lagavulin 16 and potentially Talisker 10 could be another Lagavulin 16 enabler. These really kind of impactful, really potent, aromatic single malt Scotch whiskies. Now, what are we talking about with all of these things so far? We're talking enablement. I have literally sat in front of you right now and confessed that if it wasn't for Lagavulin 16, you would be watching somebody else potentially on a Thursday night or some other night, or maybe there wouldn't be a Thursday night, or there wouldn't be an Aquavitae channel. There wouldn't be me obsessed. Lagavulin 16 from Diageo enabled that. The Flora and Fauna series enabled exploration into places that we didn't dream would have access before. The same as the enablement that was enjoyed from the independent bottling, the cask trading, the bulk sales, enabling much, much more flavour explanation, much more variation, much more character, much more excitement, much more fun, much more joy in whiskey, all on the back of big companies like Diageo. Diageo enabled that. Classic Malts of 1988, enabling flavour spectrum, flavour chasing, differentiation, sipping for flavour over consumption. Now, the last thing I'm going to share with you is the single biggest enabler that exists in Scotch whisky. There is nothing to touch it. It is the biggest. Everything else that we've been talking about up till now is just a little piece of the pie that is this thing. It is everything. And yet, I think you're going to be surprised at what comes up next. Heading to Campbelltown for the Eat, Sleep, Dram, Repeat. So excited for that. Daisy's heading to Campbelltown. That's going to be a cracking thing. The access that you're going to get, the welcome that you're going to get, Daisy, you're going to love it. I can't wait to hear how you got on down there. Say hello to Donald and the team. I'm sure it's Donald that's going to be looking after you. They are fantastic. I was in Yorkshire recently, says Ben. In a pub, they had no Scotch whisky on the bar. I asked and they found a dusty Lagavulin 16 that wasn't on the till. They sold it to me all night at £3.25 a dram. Did you enjoy it? I think you're recalling the story you must have done. Greg in Paris is saying, 5. Diageo offered us Port Ellen, Brora, Rosebank. Well, interestingly, they came out with the kind of special releases, didn't they? The enthusiasts built up Port Ellen, Brora, Rosebank. Diageo enabled it. We took it. They've made it into a premium product and excluded us from it. I don't want to get negative. I could just get on a big rant about that as well. Diageo didn't know what to do with the stocks that were produced at Brora. Diageo didn't really have a good reputation about Port Ellen. Nobody loved Port Ellen until it was given time in old distillery wood to become a legend. Doodle is saying, not even joking, if that's indeed the case, without Lager 16, I would not be in whiskey right now. I think that whether it's a direct connection or something. But anyway, what's the next thing? I'm looking for somebody. What is the biggest enabler of everything? Everything that I've spoken about tonight exists because of Johnnie Walker. Blends, yes. But the biggest blend, the most successful, the most iconic brand, the thing that everybody knows from 100 paces, square bottles, diagonal labels, striding men, Johnnie Walker Red, Johnnie Black, 12, Johnnie Blue. Johnnie Walker as a brand, when it comes to alcohol, I mean, there are brands that are as big, but it's massive. It's difficult to find others. In whiskey, it beats everything. The existence of Johnnie Walker for 200 years has driven everything that we've spoke about. Yes, Buchanan's, Ballantyne's, Dewar's, Teachers, J&B, the list goes on and on and on. But today, under the stewardship of Diageo, Johnnie Walker is massive. Now, you may or you may not take a Johnnie Walker. You may or you may not have a Johnnie Walker on your shelf like I do. It's over my right shoulder on virtually every vPub for the last few years. There's Johnnie Walker sitting here. Before I opened up tonight, and it's still in my glass here at the back. It still is. Makes itself very obvious. I poured, this is a 1960s Johnnie Walker Red. Doesn't taste anything like the Johnnie Walker Red today. Of course it doesn't. That's for a lot of different reasons. Johnnie Walker drives all of it, has driven all of it. For everything that's good that it's enabled, it's brought along some challenges. Low ABV, drinking for consumption potentially, drinking as part of a mixed drink, rather than kind of slowing and being contemplative with flavour. And if you wanted to get to the contemplative flavour stuff, you would be priced out if you were chasing Johnnie Walker. There are some exceptions, and I'll get on that in a second. I think you know what's coming. But the reason that all of these malt distilleries are even in existence still today and for hundreds of years is because in the mid-19th century, grocers started to make blends. Blends were best placed to go out there and be branded and be adopted by people the world over. Those blends needed malt to flavor and added character, style, shape, texture, all of that stuff to the base grain whiskey. And as such, all of these malt distilleries exist for that reason. It's different today. We've got new distilleries producing whiskey for single malt's sake first. But these traditional legacy distilleries, the legends, they didn't exist to provide any market with single malt. They existed to empower and to be ingredients for blends. I don't sit of an evening drinking Johnnie of any colour, red, blue, black, green. But I do occasionally. And when I find a good Johnnie Walker, I do enjoy sitting of an evening and enjoying it. And the fact that it's Johnnie Walker is incidental, let's be honest. But they do exist. The reason that everything exists, the reason that we are here, is because the stewardship, the guardianship, the development, the progress of that brand doesn't need to be at its optimal, at its best, but it's been good enough for it to endure. And for it still to be, in 2025, a very cool brand. Look at this evolution image that I've got here. I nicked this from Diageo. I hope I'm not going to get into trouble for sharing this. But this is the evolution of the Johnnie Walker Striding Man for just about 120 years worth of evolution. The latest one that we've got is 10 years old now. It's probably due for an update because they can't help footering, right? But I have to be honest, if you're gonna update things and if you're gonna rebrand, there's a lot that we can learn from Diageo's canny hand, from its wisdom over the years. Because despite that evolution that you see on screen right now, you can still recognize that DNA, the identity, the shape, the structure, everything. Okay, they flipped the guy around. Originally, he would have been walking off to your left-hand side. He's walking off to the future now. So the original 1908 one's been turned around. But it's just so iconic. It's been well handled. It's been looked after. This is careful hands. This is wisdom. This is canny decision making. This is this type of respect. That's what we need a bit more of. Guardians, not sandbox nonsense. The special releases is a mess. You pick up the original 12-year-old from the special releases, it looks very similar to this, but you know that there's something different about it. It's because it's the special releases. It's elegant, it's gorgeous. The last few years when they got all the highlighters out and the watercolors, and no disrespect to any of the artists involved, but it's just like somebody said earlier, forced. We could learn a wee bit from Johnnie Walker with all of that. How much have I raved about this on the vPub? Bear in mind, I was raving about 51, 52 pounds bottle of Johnnie Walker. This is a 200-year anniversary edition. It's not the celebratory blend. Few of you have been making that mistake. The celebratory blend was also good, by the way. I'm not sad if you've bought that thinking it's this, but this is the 200th anniversary edition that came out in 2020. But this is now available for £37.50 on one of the biggest online retailers. There is not a better bargain in whiskey you can buy right now because there's no age statement on this. We don't know what's in it. It doesn't tell us. It's just an homage to the original white label Johnnie Walker back in the day to celebrate 200 years. But I guarantee you whatever's in this is gorgeous whiskey at £37.50. Even if you have to pay £50, as I was recommending up until now, you have a Johnnie Walker on the shelf that you can be absolutely proud of. And it proves that Diageo has the capability in its armory to bring fantastic products. Something has gone wrong in recent times. Something is just out of touch, disconnected, tone deaf, unhinged, swivel-eyed madness. But the distilleries are still there. The canny minds that have made all the good decisions are still around. They still have the ability to bring good stuff. Fred Drummond has bought me a dram. New superstar, Fred, thank you so much for your generosity, saying enjoying the JW Princess Street Summer 2022. Well, a lot of people have been recommending that experience. Blend at the moment, excellent. Cheers. Thank you very much, Fred, for the dram. Cheers to you. I want to mention there were loads of other things in my sheet. When I was trying to come up with 5 things, I wanted 5 things that I could speak about passionately. I could try to be, I'm not really punchy, but things that I could bring. But think of all the investment. They de-invested in Kilmarnock, a travesty, heartbreak, terrible. Right now, the controversy that's going on in Canada, where they're shipping jobs south of the border into the United States and just walking away on where they've been in Canada for Crown Royal and things like that. Weird. I mean, decisions that we just can't fathom. But they've had huge investment. Just in recent years in Scotland alone, £200 million of investment in the Four Corners. As much fancy and as overpriced as that can be, it's a bit silly at times. Hopefully, that new CEO talking about de-premiumizing and making it a lot more accessible for more footfall rather than more exclusive footfall, we might see some improvements there. That was a huge upgrade to Colilla, to Clynelish, to Cardew, and to Glenkinchie. Then we have that amazing visitor experience in Princess Street in Edinburgh. Somebody pointed out to me, sent me a direct message inside Patreon, one of the guys, I think it was Ben, it was Matt Bishop, maybe, I think it was Matt Bishop, Whiskey Games, said the single biggest investment that's ever been placed in Scotch whisky, purely for tourism's sake. There are things that's right and good. And sometimes maybe we're throwing babies out with bathwater. Most of the time we are right, and we should always shout to protect our space, to give independent feedback and comment and share our feelings and our experiences. But sometimes there is an argument for credit where credit's due. And if we do feedback the positive stuff too, there is an opportunity for that positivity to endure. Aquaviti and everyone says Justin Wan. JW Black Label, the 70s and 80s bottlings is great. If you can get a hold of it, I think the prices are still reasonable for what it is. I did a blind lineup of 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s. Johnnie Walker Black Label. Some of you in tonight might have been present when that happened. It was pre-pandemic, but it was fascinating. The best bottle blind on the night by a margin was 1990s. And it was only after the tasting that I thought about that it made sense, because the stocks that they could potentially be drawing in the 1990s would have potentially been stock from the Whiskey Lock and things. That would have been maybe better, older, more mature stuff in the mix there. But it's down to what you pick up. How is it being stored? What batches it from which decade, from which year, that type of thing. But you're absolutely right. Compared to the Johnnie Walker Black of today, it's night and day. I'm also a wee bit put off by Johnnie Walker Green right now. Johnnie Walker Green was definitely a Mike Collings thing. And when it first came out, that was really quite a substantial, enjoyable thing. Very fairly priced. 15-year-old pure malt whiskey, 43% ABV. Fantastic. The last bottle of Johnnie Walker Green that I own isn't even in the vPub. It's up in the drinks cabinet. It's used as a mixer. It's not. It's just overly sickly sweet. It's not easy to drink on its own. You can drink it on ice. You can use it as a mixed drink, as a neat sipper, which was what Johnnie Walker Green was amazing for. I can't do it. I can't get on with it at all. This, for the same price and, as I've just demonstrated, cheaper than Johnnie Green right now, is lights out. Night and day. Completely different. I speak to you as an independent voice. I speak to you as a punter. Something in the customer end. I don't have any affiliation with Diageo. I don't have any insight, no under the hood, no behind the curtain, nothing. I say all of this just from somebody who just adores whiskey and enjoys it from a customer side. And Justin is saying Scotch based tonight, but should But shout out for the Diageo and Balcones, fantastic American whiskey. I recommend everyone to give it a try if you can get your hands on it. We were all worried that that would go belly up when Diageo took it over. It seems to be doing okay. The Distill Ventures thing is a worry because the Diageo had a lot of kind of pet projects going on through Distill Ventures scheme, but they've pulled the plug on that because profit's a bit tight and the shareholders need to be looked after. And anyway, yeah, a good shout out, Justin. Thank you for indulging me tonight on my evangelism, rants, mini rants, distractions and everything, talking about the things that we could maybe appreciate for Diageo. Hope it's been worthwhile. Next week, we'll change tact and do something different altogether. But before we get there, we have lots and lots of online Scotch Whisky Awards to prepare. I hope I can look forward to all your involvement in that in the weeks and the days ahead. More on that to follow. There's more announcements coming out to Patreons in the weeks and days ahead as well. But I'll remind everyone, please grab yourself a bottle of that Ardnahoe before it's gone. We have to have a release that no one comes to me and says, Roy, I missed out on and I feel sad. We've done the best we can to bring out plenty so that we can all enjoy the stuff. So yes, final plug for it. Where did I put it? Over my shoulder. I can't wait to get together with patrons and we can all enjoy it, probably on a wee lock-in or whatever, but it's the last I'll mention it on the vPub and we can move on to the next project. I hope you're going to stay for the quiz at the end. It's an interesting one tonight, and it's going to be interesting for the canny hands, how they navigate their way through it. Greg is saying, same here, Roy. Totally disappointing batch of the green label I have. Don't even want to review it, almost never drink it. But I did try great batches from it. He's talking about in the past. Fantastic, Greg. Justin is saying, quiz soon, I'm ready. He's still awake. You're a machine. You're a machine, Justin. Orange Wheel, good to see you, Rule. He's saying, Roy, without blowing too much peat smoke up your arse, your intelligent whiskey insight is always a pleasure to listen to. Well, Rule, you can please come back and hang out here a wee bit more often. Geez. But less of those comments. It's difficult to handle. I feel my cheeks flushing. Thank you, Rule. That's nice of you. Graham Fraser is saying, JW Green, it now has just 4 malts in it. It was better with more malts in the past and a bit less footering, I think. A bit less, too much first fill casks, maybe. Too much caramel. I don't know. I don't know what's making it so sick. It's not. I like a sweet whiskey. I really am somebody who can really get on board with a nice sweet whiskey, but it can't be sickly, can't be icky. And that was that Johnnie Walker Green that I had. The last one was terrible. Alistair Gray saying this Ardnahoe is superb. There is similar icing sugar notes of your previous Loch Lomond Chardonnay, and I love it. Alistair, I'm so glad you're enjoying it. Alan Smith celebrating being a member for 32 months of the Barflies. Well done on the release, Roy. Alan, I hope that means that you're loving the Ardnahoe as well, buddy. Fantastic. Have I managed to cover everything? I think so. Let's finish off with a wee quiz at the end. Will there be any Diageo questions tonight? Maybe, but I'm not sure how much listening tonight is going to help you at the quiz at the end. You maybe get a point or two out of it. Do you not find the JW Green to be very thin and watery, says Jimmy Legg? I think maybe, but I was just too distracted by the sickliness of the last bottle. Tim is in here tonight. Whiskey Influencer, good to see you, buddy. Can't wait for the Ardnahoe. Hopefully it hits the highs of the Daft Mill. My goodness. So you're asking for a 6-year-old peated Isla to go toe-to-toe with a 15-year-old farm distillery Daft Mill from the East Coast. I get where you're coming from, buddy. I'm not going to set you. I'm not going to oversell that much. It's a completely different thing. It was less than half the price of the Daft Mill. Suffice to say, Tim, I am confident. I can look you in the eye and say I'm confident you will like it. Let's see. We'll tune into the Whiskey Influencer on Instagram and see what he says about it. Good luck, everyone, for the quiz at the end. It's optional. 3 multiple choice answers for each thing. Look out for banana skins. Look out for the deliberately obtuse asshat questions, of course. If you're struggling, you can lean on the crowd. You're just playing against yourself. It's just fun Pass mark is usually 5, and I would suggest that tonight is fair for it to be a 5 out of 10 pass mark. Andy is still in. He's saying, you've yet to disappoint us with your releases today. Thank you, Aquaviti. Well, thank you, Andy. Justin is saying starfruit. If you know, you know. Absolutely. There's starfruit in that. There definitely is. And Roy We Trust says, Tim, thank you very much, buddy. I'll see what you say once that Ardnahoe arrives with you. All right, here we go. Good luck, everyone. Question 1. Which of these distilleries, not owned by Diageo, have had a Flora and Fauna release in the past? I like these questions, don't I? Which of these have had a Flora and Fauna release in the past, not owned by Diageo? A. Ben Romack, B. Royal Brackla, or C. Bladnoch? Just in time for the quiz, says Mark Whiskey Whistle. There's my old pal. Asia, Canada, then back to Korea again. I think you're in Korea now, aren't you, Mark? It's amazing to welcome you into the vPub, buddy. It's nice to still have you putting out whiskey content as well, being part of this community. Nice to have you in here tonight. Which of these distilleries, not owned by Diageo, have had a Flora and Fauna release in the past? A. Ben Romack, B. Royal Brackla, or C. Bladnoch? Now, a lot of the time for the first question, you can sometimes be sure. Bruce, I see you, Bruce. You can sometimes be sure that you're always going to get a freebie. Everything's going to be right. It doesn't matter what you choose. But if you see a banana, the banana skin tells you it might not be the case. I can tell you that Bladnoch was a Flora and Fauna release. Well done, Mark Whiskey Whistle. Royal Brackla was a Flora and Fauna release. Well done, Bruce. But unfortunately, Bruce, Ben Romack was not. Balmainic was, once upon a time, but Ben Romack has never seen a Flora and Fauna release, and it's never been under the stewardship of Diageo. Question 2. Founded in 1890, which ex-Edrington Speyside distillery installed Saladin maltings in 1950 and launched its first single malt as an 8-year-old in 1976? Now, this looks like a difficult question for question 2. We need some canny hands. A. Glengoyne, B. Tamdhu, C. Glenrothes. Founded in 1890, which ex-Edrington Speyside distillery installed Saladin maltings in 1950 and launched an 8-year-old single malt in 1976. So nice to have so many of you in hanging out with me for the quiz at the end. Hey, how are we doing? 2.25 hours in. Not bad. We'll finish right about the usual time. This is so knowledgeable. Y'all are. Absolutely. Can't catch you out. Whiskey Whistle is suggesting it's a tough one, but I suspect he's already answered. Founded in 1890, ex-Edrington Speyside distillery. Okay, if it's ex-Edrington, could be Glengoyne, but it's Speyside, so it's not Glengoyne, because Glengoyne's Southern Highlands. So that leaves us a 50-50 between Tamdhu and Glenrothes. Saladin boxes is all about Tamdhu. Tamdhu, also Glenrothes, is, I don't know, about 15 or 20 years older, 1870s, I think, for Glenrothes founding. It's a bit older than Tamdhu. So if you answered B, well done. We move into question 3. Which of these Highland distilleries are capable of comfortably producing whiskey from grains other than malted barley? Now, theoretically, any distillery that's set up with a wee kind of modifications here and there could do this, but what I'm talking about specifically designed to be set up to achieve such a thing. A. Chininic, B. 8 Doors, or C. Inchdairney? Banana skin again. Which of these Highland distilleries are capable of comfortably producing whiskey from grains other than malted barley? Justin Wan is pointing out that Glenrothes is also not an ex-Edrington distillery. So it's kind of, the questions seem hard, but if you just slow down a little bit, read the questions, employ canny thinking, process of elimination, that type of thing, you might find yourself getting through the quizzes a wee bit better. Sugar Kitty saying, perhaps one we just heard about, doing rye in a special release, says Sugar Kitty. Did you hear such a thing earlier? Petehead is saying ryeing. Yeah, 8 Doors Ryan. He's occasionally in here. I don't know if he's hanging out with us tonight. My mate Yen at Inchdearney, says Peter Hunt. C. Peter Hunt is going for C. Aquaviti, my mate at Inchdearney. Certainly C, but also A with the hammermill, says Graham Young. Comfortably is at the banana skin, going for A. Oh, dear, 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 dear. Which of these Highland distilleries, I should say, is capable of comfortably producing, but I put in are capable, so we know there's more than one. I've also mentioned Highland, so it can't be Inchdearney. Chinenic and 8 Doors are both Highland. Either of them would have done. 8 Doors have one of these conversion vessels, so they can handle grains other than malted barley, as well as a traditional but fairly small mash tun. And Chinenic, as we know, famously has the mash filter and hammer mill. A and B, the way to navigate that are the plural thing, and of course, Inchdearney. Sneaky, but if you answered A or B, you're okay, you're in good shape. Question 4, an upcoming vPub will feature 10-year-old malts, new versus old. It might be next week, I'm not sure. Depends on mood, of course. Which of these distilleries, however, have released a 10-year-old that's a single malt as a vatted core range release as opposed to a single cask? A, Kingsbarns in Fife. B, Eden Mill in Fife. Or C, Annandale in the Lowlands. Which of those have got a 10-year-old available? Peter Hunt is saying, I didn't read the question. I've been trying really hard. Justin as well, I think, might have slipped up. You know, I've got all these whiskies out here, but what I'm actually smelling more than anything is my Ardnahoe. It's quite a peaty whiskey, even for somebody that suffers from a bit of peat smoke blight like I do. Justin is saying, I've not slipped up just yet. Tim has been honest, saying no idea. He's going to guess A for Kingsbarns. Fair play to you for being honest, Tim. That's nice to play the guessing game as well. Whiskey Mechanic is saying A along with Graham. Lowlander, Ted Brooks, Too Slow, Fernando, Boomer. Almost all of you, in fact, are going for A for Kingsbarns. And of course, you're absolutely spot on. Eden Mill and Annandale both have 10-year-olds available, but Annandale perpetually bottle single casks, and Eden Mill's release is indeed a single cask. Question 5. Here we have a distillery scene. Looks like a lot of new building that's going on here, I would suggest. I know that the scale is quite small here. It looks almost model-like, but I'm just going to ask you to look at the distillery, process for a second, and then, this is tricky. What feature does this distillery offer? A, it has an on-site micro distillery. B, it has a 10-year-old possibility releasing later this year. Or C, it has a visitor centre with on-site accommodation and a luxury whiskey maker experience. It's a distillery that doesn't get mentioned very often. Very under the radar. But it's out there, quietly doing its thing. If I told you we're in the Highlands, would it help you? Does this Highland distillery have an on-site micro distillery? Does it have a 10-year-old release possibly later this year? Or does it have a visitor centre, on-site accommodation, luxury whiskey maker experiences? Justin Wan is saying, this has been an amazing vPub. Please accept another dram for you. A linkwood, maybe. Justin, I'll tell you what I'm going to do. Well, I just grab a linkwood in return for your tenacity. I'll leave you to work out what this distillery is. The first one to hand, I've got quite a few Linkwoods on the shelf actually, looking at it, is a signatory, 100 proof Linkwood. 2013, a 10-year-old from second fill, Oloroso, sherry butts. Now, you and I would probably suggest that sherry is okay, Linkwood and sherry's fine, but it's probably at its best from a classy bourbon cask, right? There we go, Justin. I'll raise this wee glass to you. Say thank you for your dram. Thank you for your energy and staying up. And cheers, fella. It's nice to know you. We are looking at Ardnahoe in the Highlands. Ardnahoe is not in a hurry to release anything. It's going to be a while, maybe 10 years or so, 10 years old before they release anything. But that's not for a few years yet. They do not have or offer a visitor centre experience. They don't have any accommodation and they don't offer fancy luxury whiskey maker experiences. They're doing things very quietly in the background, but they're serious, and they do have an on-site micro distillery. It's quite a cruel question there, wondering if any of you could get up to Graham Fraser level. I don't know what Graham answered for that one, but I imagine that probably he's one of the few in here, that would be confident about answering that one. Good. Might mean that you're scrabbling now all of a sudden for your pass mark 5 out of 10 at the halfway point. Question 6, everyone. Mikey Hayes in, good to see you. Where's Royal Vermeer in as well? Ian Bruce, Whiskey Mechanic. Lots of people slipping to 4 seem to have caught you out tonight. There might be less 10 out of 10s tonight. Which distillery gifts a cask of whiskey to each local newborn child, which, by the time they turn 18, can be sold back to the distillery at market value to help with education, house purchases, or whatever? Which distillery actually has this scheme? A. Springbank, B. Ardnahoe, C. Lochranza. So a locally born newborn child from this distillery is gifted a cask of whiskey. They keep it until they're 18 years old, and then the distillery offers to buy it back off them at market value at that 18-year point, and they can use that money for further education, for a deposit on a house, for whatever it is they need. It's a way of paying back into the local community. Rick Johnson is saying it can't be one in Edinburgh. Greg is saying crazy. Never been there, so learned something new, says Frank. I was so wrong, says Fernando. Bullied by the big man. No bullying. Justin is saying, if it was Springbank, I'm moving soon and falsifying my birth year. Okay. I can tell you that the majority of you has got it right. Too Slow is spot on, saying that's cool. It is very cool. It's so cool. And they're very, very humble about it as well. But it's real. And I'm talking about Ardnahoe. It's part of an initiative. It's something that they do out there on the peninsula. Just amazing. Just amazing. And quite cool. And of course, taxes and things aren't paid until it's... there's some talk behind the scenes about it potentially being some kind of tax thing or something. But of course, whiskey's in bond until it's sold. So, an amazing initiative. Question 7. Diageo controls around 33 to 40% of Scotch whisky production, depending on the year and what's going on and stuff. The second largest Scotch producer behind them is Pernod Ricard or Chivas Brothers. How much do they control? Pernod Ricard, Chivas Brothers. A, 10 to 12%. B, 15%, C, 20 to 25%. This is a tough quiz tonight. There's going to be lots of attrition, lots of people unsubscribing, lots of people in a huff and in a rage. Greg's Whiskey Guide is saying, Ardnahoe is tiny, I can't believe it. Peter Lay is saying, how cool are they? If it was Springbank, I wish I could get Helen pregnant. But Andy, for crying out loud. Actually, I need to get better at reading comments before I speak them. I'm glad she's in her bed. Dear me. Rick Johnston is saying, is this quiz in honour of Menno's birthday? But I think, Rick, it can't just be awkward or obtuse. It has to be hopefully something that's quite interesting. It's like, oh, is that real? That's cool. I know you're just having fun, buddy. At least I hope you are. I can tell you that Pernod Ricard, a dozen distilleries versus Diageo's 30 malt distilleries, of course, but still enough for them to control a quite amazing 20 to 25% of the market. So that means that Chivas Regal, Pernod Ricard, and Diageo between them control 2/3 of Scotch whisky. Here's an interesting fact that I read. Diageo's two biggest brands are Talisker and the Singleton. Singleton is 3 distilleries, of course. But over those two brands, it accounts for 53% of Diageo's malt sales. This is a malt whisky yearbook fact. Amazing. Two top brands in Diageo, 53%. The two top malt brands for Pernod Ricard is Aberlour and Glenlivet, accounts for 99% of their malt sales. Again, another positive thing in favour of Diageo, the exposure that they give to so many more brands and so many more distilleries. Question 8. In which of these regions did Masataka Taketsuru find employment in a distillery as part of his apprenticeship during his studies from 1918 in Scotland to 1920? Which of these regions did Masataka Taketsuru find employment as part of his apprenticeship? Was it A, the Highlands, B, the Lowlands, or C, Isla? Why is that out of, did I double hit that? I think it's just out of order of not, should be fine. That's easy for you to say, says Andy. Masataka Taketsuru. I used to say Masataka Taketsuru, but I remember a Japanese speaker saying there are no accents, there are no pronounced, everything is continuous, is flat, so Masataka Taketsuru. Do my best. Fascinating story. Really, if there's ever going to be a whiskey movie made, it has to be this one. This is, oh wow, the wheels are off. So Masataka Taketsuru, when he came to Scotland for his studies, he studied at Glasgow University, then he went down to Hazelburn and Campbelltown. He spent time at Longmorn and Speyside. And he was also at Bo'ness in the Lowlands. Yeah, I've made a mess of this. Sorry, apologies. I'm going to... hopefully I've not made a mess of the rest of them. Oh, I think I might have. I'm going to need to... I have made a bit of a mess of this one. I don't know why, if there's deleted or lost slides. I'm going to need to read out the next question. So those of you that are watching with the volume down, you might struggle. You might get annoyed with me. Let's see what's happening here. I'm going to read out this question so I don't spoil anything. Yeah, I've just done that in a very odd order. The final one's fine. I'm going to read out 3 distilleries, and I would just like you to tell me which of these distilleries was founded by a Duff. That's so funny. A Duff question. And it is a Duffer as well. Which of these distilleries was founded by a Duff? A, Glenlawsie, B, Glenfiddich, or C, Glenlivet? Which of those 3 distilleries was founded by a Duff? Graham is saying there's a South Korea drama series about his life. That's Masan. You can watch it on YouTube, and you can watch it with subtitles, if I remember well. I haven't watched it for a few years, but it was like a 15, 20-minute episode that went out. I think it was daily. I didn't know it was South Korean. I thought it was actually Japanese, but it could be Korean. Peter Lee saying you are human after all. Flawed, very flawed human over here, Peter. So Glenlossie was founded by a Duff. Glenlivet was founded by a Duff. Or Glenfiddich was founded by a Duff. Absolutely spot on. Done very, very well. Graham Fraser saying I'm getting a dodgy signal lagging. I can tell you that Glenlossie. John Duff founded Glenlossie, also Longmorn Distillery as well. Longmorn Distillers, but Glenlossie came first. Glenfiddich was, of course, George Grant, and Glenlivet was William Grant. Apologies, George Grant is Glenfarclas. Glenfiddich is William Grant. Glenlivet was George Smith, wasn't it? Glenlossie was John Duff. Okay, the asshat at the end, the one that's deliberately designed to be awkward, obtuse, annoying, frustrating. Is there anyone still hanging in with a 9 out of 9 while Graham Fraser is lagging and got his dodgy signal? Daisy is asking if question 8 is a freebie. It's up to you, Daisy. You're only playing against yourself. You know the rules. Graham Fraser is on a 9 out of 9. I suspect he could be one on his own this evening. Are there any other 9 out of 9s in the building? Okay, so we're all just holding to see if we can celebrate the ass hat. This is the big boss question at the end, and it is, how many operational Scotch malt distilleries feature Ard in their name? Ard, A-R-D, Ard. Like Ardbeg is a perfect example. How many distilleries feature Ard in their name? About the same number as A, those featuring Strath in their name. About the same number as B, those featuring Ben in their name. Or about the same number as C, Highland distilleries featuring Glen in their name. This liquid is really quite nice, Justin. A good call. A wee sherry cask to change the pace a little bit. You didn't say the answer to question 8. Oh. Apologies. I know I did. It was Bo'ness and the Lowlands is the answer. So he was at Longmorn and Speyside. He was at Hazelburn in Campbelltown, and Bo'ness, which is the Lowlands, part of the Lowlands. So yeah, B it would have been for that one. So how many distilleries feature Ard? About the same number as those that feature Strath, about the same number as those that feature Ben, or about the same number of Highland distilleries that feature Glen. Ian Bruce is saying you did, Roy. Okay, voting with A for A with Graham. Oh wow. I suspect Bo'ness. Yep, that's right. There's no hyphen in there. There's an apostrophe. Wow. Does Cardew count? Kyle Taylor is asking. Absolutely. There's Ard in Cardew, isn't there, Kyle? So absolutely, that counts as well. Oh dear. Now I do feel like Menno. Maybe this is an homage to Menno since it's his birthday tomorrow. Okay, I'm going to help you. I'll give you some answers here. Strath in their name. There are 4. Ben in the name. There are 4. Highland distilleries featuring Glen. There are 9. Does that help you? Chance to change your mind. Tony Nelson is saying switching to C. Dave the Brave is going for C. Kyle Taylor has changed guess C. Go for C after reviewing, says Fernando. Whiskey with Molly, C. Everybody going for Highland Distilleries featuring Glen. Because we have Ardbeg, Ardmore, Ardnahoe, Ardnamurchan, Ardross, Ardgowan, Cardew, as spotted by Kyle Taylor. But we also have Tullabarton, which brings us up to 8, meaning that the closest is, of course, Glen, Highland Glens, Glencadam, Glendronach, Glengarry, Glenglassaugh, Glengoyne, Glenmorangie, Glenord, Glenturret, and Glenwivis. Horrible asshat question, but I think, hopefully, you see that with the ability to cannily read the questions, to look out for the banana skins and all of that thing, you maybe get the chance to get a couple of questions that you otherwise might not have. Graham Fraser, a 9 out of 10 tonight. I suspect it's been the first time in a long, long time where the quiz has managed to trip everyone up, including me on question 8 and 9 tonight. And apologies, that was me not paying enough attention as I got set up tonight. Listen, in return, you've got a longer outro. And the reason that I've gone for a longer outro is that I realised how much I rely on all that Patreon support, how much it drives and motivates everything. It enables everything that I do. And I realised when I was watching it on my phone or even on TV that the names are so small and it's like, come on, I can do better. So with your permission, 15 or so extra seconds of an outro at the end of the vPub. Hopefully you can all, as patrons, enjoy your names on the credit roll at the end. It's just the little things, isn't it? Listen, I'm going to raise a wee glass and thank you all for your support on everything in Patreon, Barfly's Facebook page, for purchasing and picking up that Ardnahoe. I know you're going to love it. I've never felt so confident. For everything that you enable me to be able to achieve, for all of it, I'm very, very grateful. It is truly a privilege. I'll, of course, be back here with you next week for another session talking about something altogether different. Orange Will saying, I'm re-inhaling that peat smoke I was blowing your way earlier. There you go, Will. I knew you would turn it around. No blushing anymore. Kyle Taylor, still loved it. Great quiz at the end. Thank you, Kyle. Thanks so much. Mark Whiskey Whistle on a 7 out of 10 with the crowd help. Superb, buddy. So nice to see you in here with us tonight. Hellswood is saying, thanks for a great vPub. Hoping Hells doesn't slap me when she watches the replay. See you Sunday. She might. You deserve it. Thanks for another great vPub. That's nice that you're coming up on Sunday. It says Lowlander. Peter is saying, and with that, I'm calling it a day and going to hit the sack. Thanks as always for organised Agua Day and for all you do. See you next time. Slanchiva. Lachlan is saying, thanks, Roy, and have a good evening, folks. Chris Pollock is saying, thanks, Roy. See you next Thursday. And Justin Wan is saying, see you next week. Fantastic vPub tonight once again. This should go down as a classic. Thank you. Nice words. Daisy is saying, thanks, Roy, for a fab Ardnahoe and tonight. Thank you, Daisy. See you soon. And Orange Will is saying the Ardnahoe is a belter. Well, here's to that. You're all very dearly loved. Good night, folks. Slanchiva.